I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Rambling Man Podcast, episode number 93. This one's with Rae Gronmark, and we talk about fiber arts and race and kind of what it's like in the fiber arts industry for a person of color. And we talk about race in general. It's an absolutely amazing conversation. I'm so happy that I was able to have her on the podcast. If you'd like to find out more information about Rae, you can find her on Instagram at True Spark Designs. That's TRUSPARKDESIGNS. And she's got a link tree with all of her outbound links right there. But I appreciate her being on and lending her insight. Sponsor this week is Feral Giant. Feral Giant is a graphic design, illustration, and social media consultation company based here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So they do work for clients big and small all over the country, all over the globe, in fact. But they also do photography, videography, video editing, and audio editing, website design, SEO, writing, content development. Hell, they'll babysit your kids if it nets them money. So make sure you give them a follow on social media on either Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Feral Giant. And be sure to give them an email today and hire them for your next project. Without much further ado, here's the episode.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Here's how there's no good entry point. So this will be the entry point, right? Oh, and if I say anything, I swear to God, I do not mean any offense. I'm just dumb. I've had that happen a few times. In fact, did you listen to the episode with Kitty at all?
I listened to part of it. I didn't listen to the whole thing.
I told her beforehand. I was like, if cosplay is not the right term, please just tell me. I just don't know. I was like, absolutely. I don't know. So if I say anything wrong, and there's actually one thing that I was not sure what was the correct term, and I looked at your Instagram and I figured out what is the correct term. Now, can I remember which is the correct term? And I'm honestly just stupid and didn't know what was the proper term, Hispanic or Latinx, Latino.
There's a lot of so I mean, like on that note of like people of color are not a monolith,
right?
There's a lot of people. What I would always say is always go with what that person uses for themselves or what you see being used in that conversation. Because there are a lot of reasons why people don't like the term Hispanic. Some people are like, no, that's how I identify. Like that is me. And in that case, it's just respecting their identity. There's even people who dislike the term Latinx and they feel that it doesn't, and that they're like, no, use the gendered term. That's what I want. But that is actually uncomfortable for me. I don't like that. So it's a great question. For one of those, sometimes it's one of those read the room kind of things where it's like, okay, how are they referring to themselves, and go with that. And
so this is funny, but you have to know that this woman and I really care about one another to start this, like picked on one another a lot. And she was born in Mexico, but was adopted when she was super young. And I don't know how to say it. If you did not know, you would not know. And it's the part of the reason why I say that is, yes, and she's like from around here, but she talks like a California girl, like Valley girl, kind of like, oh my God, we're going to go down. Like that's how she talks. And she's
all about Target and Starbucks, all those basic things that I think are hilarious. And like she and I would joke about that a lot. I actually started an Instagram account, but never did anything with it, called Basic Big Man, because I'm 6'7", bald and bearded. And I was like, let me do like basic, like me throwing pillow feathers and, just stupid stuff because we're idiots. And something, and I used the term Hispanic. She's like, no, that's a racist term. I was like, what the fuck is it? I didn't, and she got mad at me. I was like, I didn't know.
Yeah. So it's one of those where it's, if it's a mistake that's made, obviously I might say that can be a problematic term.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay. I think the hardest thing with a lot of this is there needs to be room for people to fuck up. And a good, like, there is a good faith fuck up where you're like, oh, I had no idea. Like, it's taking the correction. It's when people say, hey, that's a problematic term, and then that person doubles down.
Right.
That's when that becomes problematic. But I mean, we're going to screw up.
No. And if I can promote any episode, there's an episode I did with Katie Ross, Dr. Katie Ross, or Katie Ross, PhD. I can't remember which way it is. And it was on, she teaches speech. She got her PhD, and she is also a non-binary queer person, but also can be allowed to use the term she, her for her.
Yes.
And it was a very good conversation, because she kept saying, I know I'm not offended by you because your heart is in the right place. It's like, I wish a lot more people would be like, some people are just dumb.
Yeah.
Like some people are just, I always joke that I was like, if you don't like gay people, you've never met a gay person. Like it's so, like, you just got to get people in your life that understand that are outside of your normal spectrum.
Happen. None of us are immune from needing that correction. And it's not one where, I can say, hey, here's my marginalized card, and I tick these boxes, and that means that I am above reproach, which I do encounter from people. But it's sometimes, like recently, even, like, I will screw up and go, I was underinformed on this topic. Like, thank you for, and so that's part of it. And it's hard when we get into the purity politics of it, which is people who are searching for like the tiniest screw up to invalidate your humanity.
Right.
And so obviously this doesn't cover like vile, racist, homophobic, violent rhetoric. But when there are good faith mess ups that someone was saying, oh, I had no idea this was problematic, and somebody is willing to do the work to listen, because especially if somebody is willing to do the work to correct you, because that's a tremendous amount of emotional labor. So if somebody is willing to do the work to correct you and inform you, or at least say, hey, this is problematic, you need to educate yourself on why. Either of those things, we need to leave room for people to be educated and educate themselves. I do understand when somebody doubles down, no, my friend told me this was okay, we're not having this fight.
So, and I will leave all this in if you're good. This will be, I was going to start with me making fun of myself, but I'll get to that. I'll do that plenty on this episode. On that episode with Katie, something that we talked about was, I said, I feel like if you look at time as a spectrum or whatever, I was like, I feel like everything changes so quick now, where it was like, God, this is going to be great for an audio podcast. Anybody listening at home, like, it was this way for this long, and then all of a sudden everything changed in this minuscule amount of time. And I said, I think about people like my parents, who are both very open-minded, both very giving and great people, but they're also not, they're both retired. They're not out in the world. And what Katie and I were talking about, I was like, I'm going to sound really arrogant and shitty right now, and I pre-apologize for that. I was like, you need people like me in between there, just like, hold on, let me figure out how to work the language in my head to make it make sense for my parents. And I even say that, like, my little sister is queer, and there are times where my mom and sister have pushed me to explain to my dad why certain things are certain ways, because they know.
Actually a great dynamic to me, because what you're describing to me is sometimes, and we have, especially in online spaces where we have these conversations, when we have, especially like people of color or BIPOC who are having a conversation, or a white person comes in, even if it's a well-meaning white person, which I'm not always convinced a lot of times it is not, to try and correct a person of color on what they're saying, on what they're doing, on whether or not this is okay. That, and you hear the term stay in your lane a lot. And for me, that is, you guys need to collect your own. Like if I'm seeing a conversation where I think something is questionable, but I'm like, you know what, this is not for me. Like I see a lot of other people who they share this experience that I don't share, or belong to a group that I don't belong to. I'm going to allow them to decide what the limits of this conversation are. I don't need to insert myself and my lack of experience into it. I don't care how many books and blogs I've read.
Right.
Whereas, having a white person jump into a conversation, oh, well, I just finished reading White Fragility and I have some thoughts. I'm like, great, you should go share those thoughts with your white family. You should go, instead of coming for the people of color in this thread, maybe you should talk to the other white person who's coming in and being problematic in this thread.
I'm not laughing at you, but what did you say? Collect your people.
Yes.
I want to make that to a t-shirt that says white people, collect your people, or whiteys, collect your people.
Like we don't need you to come in here and collect us.
No.
Collect your people.
That's what's been fun. Like, I think I told you this in the email, that like being a white dude who grew up in black neighborhoods and going to a black high school, and then talking to, I'm going to make fun of, because I make fun of them to their faces, so it's fine. Elite white left people, to where they're like, this is a problem, and I just look at them and say, aren't you adorable? Aren't you adorable? I was like, you're hilarious. I was like, I need you. Hold on. Let me go get Danielle or LaQuisha or somebody that I grew up with. And please explain to them.
Explain it to her.
Yeah, how you have a better way of what needs to happen than Danielle and LaQuisha. Please. But when it happens, I'm going to be doing this the whole time, like filming that shit, because it's going to be chef's kiss, hilarious. Like, I don't know.
That's a whole ass attitude. That comes
you're making t-shirts left and right. That's a whole ass. That's another t-shirt, man. You can't
that's a white savior attitude that comes in a lot. That's, let me educate you. Let me tell you something about you that you don't know.
Yeah.
We're like, okay.
That's well, see, that's I will say a benefit of being 6'7" and a pretty big dude who's fought a lot and played a lot of sports and boxed a lot. Dude, I just look at people and go, you're adorable. Like, especially dudes. I love doing that to dudes because they're just like, they don't want to fight back. It's like, aren't you adorable? Look at you.
But in a way, that is a way of leveraging your privilege as well. That's a great way. I have a friend who is a huge dude, again, about that size, 6'7", very muscular, big guy, goes to the gym a lot. And his favorite thing to do is wear shirts that are going to make that guy at the gym have a conversation with him and leave other people alone, leave his wife alone, leave other people of color alone, because he can insert himself physically into those conversations and deflect. That's him leveraging his privilege to do the work and be an ally in those spaces, or to at least get attention and then yield the floor when someone else needs something to say. He makes the space, which is also an important aspect of that. Is like, here, I am claiming the space. I'm going to make everyone clear out. Now listen to them speak. Right. And backing off.
My friend Hannah Minocchio, she has a company in Cleveland called Snakes and Aces. They do screen printing. And she made a t-shirt that said, "Fight like a girl," in bright. It's a black shirt in bright pink letters. And I gladly wear that shirt in public and love watching dudes being like, doing a double take of like, what the fuck? Why is that giant dude wearing it? I was like, cause fuck y'all. Like, that's why I'm wearing it.
It's unfortunate, but as a giant white dude, there are other white dudes who are going to listen to you. Yeah. Even if you don't have that lived experience, even if you're not coming from that, they're going to listen to you when they're not taking people like me seriously.
But there's part of me that's trying to spin that to a positive and going, you know what, though? If I can get into that dude's head and change his damn mind, then I know it was not a great way in, but fuck it. At the end, he's turned around. He's on our side. Welcome to the party, pal. Like, I'm just happy you're here. Like,
and provided you're not speaking over someone or claiming an experience as your own, to me, I find that is actually doing the work of an ally, because if you are able to have those conversations, that might make that person more receptive to the voices they need to be listening to. That's part of doing the work.
And like I said, I think it's just everything has changed, and it feels like in such a infinitesimally small amount of time that some people, it's just going to take having some, God, again, I don't mean to sound like an arrogant ass hat. But it's going to take some, like I said, talking to my dad. My dad is a very balanced, like black and white person. Like, and to get him to understand things, like my mom and sister had me talk to him and explain Juneteenth to him and about that being a national holiday. And I hate to say it, it ended with me just saying, you know what? National holidays are bullshit. Walmart's open on Christmas. I was like, until we actually make everything a real national holiday and let poor people stay home on Christmas. I was like, I told him, I was like, none of it really matters. I was like, there's a President's Day that is an amalgam. That got me off on a whole nother rant of like, just like, I was like, no, holidays are not holidays for poor people. I was like, you don't get, Walmart's not closed, you know, nothing. And in fact, anymore, nothing is closed on a lot of holidays. Thanksgiving, things are open. I was
Absolutely.
like, and that really bothers me. Like that, I was like, that's a big, I was like, Juneteenth is the icing on the cake of this big giant issue of everything. And, but it was funny watching my mom and sister, the men I walked in the room going, hey, tell your dad what's going on.
Tapping you in. Hockey enforcer, like, put me in, coach. Go.
Yeah. I'm in the penalty box, just waiting on the buzzer to go down and go out on the ice. Okay. Well, man, we started straight out the gate with the heaviness. Awesome. Now here's where I'm dumb. I have never set one of those Zoom meeting emails because I just didn't know how to do it. As good as I am with technology, I didn't know how to do it. So I've never done it. And I'm always like, I'll just email it, right? And then I was like, you know, I should probably take 5 seconds and look how to do that. And I found out how to do it in about 5 seconds. I was like, I'm an idiot. Why didn't
if you've never done it, you don't know how convoluted the process is going to be.
Right.
Like, do I have to do a verify account? Do I have to do this? Is this free? What do I like? So if you have no experience doing it, then yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's early in on Zoom. I tried to do it one time and it didn't work. And I had people like, wait, this is not working. What the hell? I was yelling at me about it. I was like, son of a, never mind. I'm going to just do it all over. So, okay. So where are you based now versus where did you grow up?
So I mostly grew up in Colorado. My family was moved here. My mom was born in Mexico. And my family is all in very southern Arizona. Like, we used to go across the line regularly. Like, the town is half in Mexico, half in Arizona. And most of my extended family is still there. We were all born there. My oldest brother spent the most time in Arizona. And I was moved up here fairly young, 3 or 4, which was an interesting aspect for me. And like, you know, as an adult, recognizing the isolation that my mom went through moving up here. My oldest brother is much, much darker skinned than myself or my middle brother. He grew up speaking Spanish, grew up around my family. And then when we all moved here to just an overwhelmingly white suburb, there was literally one black dude in my neighborhood at my school that is still my friend. Because when you're in a place this white, you cling to each other, you stay together, you make your community. But with that in mind, and we were so young, our mother tongue, our language was withheld from us when we were younger, because my parents saw these children can pass as white, which didn't always happen a lot when we were younger, especially when we went outside and like the melanin would come out to play and it would be very obvious we were different. But they were afraid we would have an accent on top of that and it would make us stick out. So there was so much erasure that went on for such a long time to have us blend and be safe. And things I didn't even learn about until when I was adult, that my mother used to receive hate mail from like the former owner of the house telling her that her kind didn't belong here, that they would be run out. And we did experience a lot of racism growing up, experienced a lot of even like really negative interactions with police who didn't believe that we lived in that neighborhood. Like, look at this car, look at you. I know you don't live here. What are you doing here?
Which part of Colorado?
So this was in Littleton.
Okay. Littleton. Oh, geez. Isn't Littleton? Wait, I know that name. I may need to drink more coffee. Is that where Columbine
It
happened?
was. And I was actually in neighboring high school when that
Holy
occurred.
shit.
That was, and that's another whole mood. But I was actually a freshman in high school when that happened.
Wow. Okay.
And it wasn't super far from us. And, we're freshmen. So we're coming fresh off of middle school, and a good chunk of our friends went to Columbine, and no one had cell phones at the time. Like, no one had smartphones because, this was many eons ago. And so we didn't know what was going on. All the schools went on lockdown. Like, I remember our teacher running to the door, locking the door, and shutting off the lights. And we were all going, what the heck is going on?
Mm.
And then when we finally figured it out, we were just wondering if our friends were okay.
Wow.
But yeah, Littleton has a lot of, that's just one aspect of some of the problems that exist here.
Yeah. Colorado is such a weird state in that I feel like, it's very, nature driven. I've got a friend who lives in Boulder, always going hiking. A lot of dudes who look like me who drink beer, like wearing shit from REI, but still very progressive in Boulder, but still
that's a misconception. Boulder is actually a very elitist white, like it's part of that, what you had brought up, where you're like, here's these very elite, rich white, I am so woke.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Very colonizer attitude that you can.
But also still has a little bit of that frontiersman kind of Western, old school Western vibes. I always joke, I hate when people pick on the South or pick on, God love him. I love Henry Rollins, but anytime he does a dumb voice, he goes, well, I got that there. He dips into a Southern accent. I'm like, stop doing that. Stop doing that. Because if you drive an hour outside of any major city, you're going to encounter dumbasses.
And that's very much the case in Colorado. I feel like it's held up as this liberal paradise. And I'm like, in this city, you might encounter more of that. But, I went to college out on the Western Slope. Look at Lauren Boebert.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I went to college, again, many eons ago, in her district. And when I was out there, a cross burning occurred while I was going to school there. They had buildings at my college that were named after Klan members. Like, this is not, and it's not like, oh, it was this weird thing. I'm like, that's anywhere out of Denver. And you cannot pay me to go back there. You really can't.
That's Klan members. What the, oh, good Lord. So I did find out numbers. Now, this is not great, but I found out something recently. So I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, which is in East Tennessee. So Tennessee, hell, I don't know how much you know about Tennessee. Tennessee is essentially California on its side. Memphis, Nashville, and Knoxville and Chattanooga are totally different from one another. Mm-hmm. And if like I've had people say, oh, I know Tennessee, I know Nashville. I was like, that'll get your ass kicked in Knoxville, because we are not Nashville. We are not, you do not say that. It's almost like San Francisco and LA. You don't say that shit. But I found out that the percentage of Black people in Knoxville is higher than the national average, which makes me feel very good, even though it's not still super high and it's only a few percentage points. I don't care. I'm happy for that. and because I feel like the South gets tagged a lot, and to where, look at like what's happening in Huntington Beach and all that crazy shit out there, to where it's like, hey, that's Southern California, man, where y'all are talking about liberal bastions and shit. It's like, that's Southern California. I've been to Huntington Beach. It's a very nice city. It's awesome. It's a shame of what's happening out there, because it feels great when you go down on the beach there.
And it's very easy to paint things with a broad brush and a generalized brush, but that's not how local culture works. That's not how this works, even just in suburbs outside of Denver. Where, obviously, like, it's not a secret. It's very expensive to live in Denver. House prices, especially right now, because the index is ridiculous because of COVID. um, it's almost impossible to buy a home, and it's even more impossible to rent one affordably. And so everybody loves to complain. They're like, well, everyone's moving to the suburbs and they're driving up prices. I'm like, this is we can't afford to live in Denver, asshole. Like, we don't have any mass transit. We weren't set up with the infrastructure to handle all the commuting. We literally have one road. We're not like Chicago. We have one road that runs north-south, one highway. Okay. So whenever people complain about traffic, complain about all of those things, I'm like, that's because there's a diaspora. Like, none of us can afford to live anywhere. And then when you go to different just cities and suburbs around Denver, how they're perceived within just within the community. Like, oh yeah, well, you don't want to move to that place. This place is where these kinds of people live. And we've ended up, it's getting built up now more like if we had tried to buy a house now, we'd be priced out.
Right.
And that happens very rapidly. That was like, we were priced out within a year.
That's what's happening here is since COVID started, so many people have bought houses coming from California, Florida,
Texas,
and New Jersey are the three big concentrations here. And they're buying houses $25,000, $35,000, $40,000 over asking price and actually having bidding wars. And I'm like, that's not my city. I grew up here. That's not my city, man. That's not how this is. But it's like, I helped my dad pick up a extension ladder yesterday from a friend of his. And that woman was moving, and same thing, like her house in a weird ass location. I don't think they'll listen to this, so I can say this. And it's a McMansion. Like, it's not, it's subdivision, any of that shit. So older people, and they paid, I think he said $40,000, had a bidding war, $40,000. And I was like, this is also not a cheap house. This is a big ass. This is a 25 to 2,800 square foot house. And
I'm hearing stories of like people at the moment in Denver offering like $100K over asking, paying cash. And I mean, who can reasonably do that?
Right. My friend who lives in Boulder, she signed up for this program. The city started a program for if you live in Boulder and you make under a certain amount, you can sign up for this program to get a house. This is the saddest sentence ever, at asking price, not under, but not have to do a bidding war to go over. And I was like, that's pitiful is what that is. Just
and to get a own problem, because sellers want to pass over those kinds of loans as well.
I think I bought my house in 2003. I think it was 2003, 2004. And it was on the market for 92. And I got him down to 83.5 for my house. And I just think about that versus now. It's like my house is probably $160,000 house that I could maybe get 108, but then I couldn't afford to move anywhere. That's a constant conversation with me and my friends of like talking about like taking and buying houses and renting them out for actual affordable rates to like grad students at the university here, because it's getting so crazy. And I'm like, but hell, we can't afford houses. Like, hell, you can't buy a plot of land and build a house for nothing, for anything.
It's impossible.
Oh my God. Okay. So did you all kind of stay, or did you move around a lot more when you were younger? I know you said there was some.
Stayed. Like, my parents are still in the house that they bought in 1989 in the same neighborhood.
Nice. Nice. Same. My parents bought, we moved into the house on St. Patty's Day, 1989. And because I watched the moving truck go by my elementary school. That's awesome.
And so they're still there. We, obviously I went to college. We've all like gone to different rentals, done things. My husband was in the military, so he spent a lot of time going around to a lot of places. Right. But it's, half the reason you move so much, hop around to different cities, different suburbs, different part of the state, is that problem that rents go up. And we've had places where we loved it and then they were going to raise it, $900 a month more than they were already charging us. Like, they were like, oh yeah, your new lease, we know you pay this. And they were going to raise our rent almost $1,000 more per month on a new lease. And we're like, we can't do this. We've been living here as good tenants for 7 years and we can't do this. And that's what finally prompted us to look for a house, which was a miserable process here. I mean, I know it's miserable for everyone, but my God, it was so bad. And
imagine.
And And mine arguably I feel was better than a lot of people's experience here. I definitely deferred and let them talk to my husband and all things, because sometimes if I was around or if I was too outspoken, we would be treated differently. Like, we had a great realtor, I loved him, but I got locked out of houses where other realtors actually wouldn't let me come in.
Wow.
Which really pissed off my realtor, and he reported them, but I was like, wow, and there was a few times where sellers would meet us and they'd be fine with my husband. They'd clam up as soon as I came around. And
you're like,
yeah,
hey, it's 2020, guys. Yeah. What are we doing here? I don't know if you've seen the news, but maybe don't do this. How has it been there with like masks and vaccines and stuff?
Colorado is better than a lot of places. Unfortunately, I think those attitudes are going to be mixed all around the country. We're not like Florida. I was hosting knit-alongs over the summer with people, like, because it was not local and I could do it over Zoom. We had people from all over the country participating. And there was a woman who lived in Florida, and she's like, I can't go out. It's like the pandemic's not even happening here. And this wasn't recently. This was like early, like, people are still dying by the hundreds of thousands, like at the peak of pandemic. She's like, it's like nothing ever changed. No one is wearing masks. She's like, I just can't leave my house.
I've got friends who live in St. Augustine, and they have essentially not left their house for a year and a month, I guess, right about now. But they said every once in a while they'd get in the car and just go on a drive, and they were like, hell, we had to roll up our windows because we would drive up next to a restaurant and people were eating outside and all the tables were open. There was no spacing, and nobody were
here. It's better here than in some places, but we still have, it is Colorado. And like I said, we still have those people. And unfortunately in my suburb, we have a lot of them. And I haven't, I'm on multiple medications. I have to take steroids every day for asthma. I haven't left my house.
Man.
Essentially, I've gone to like a couple of doctor's appointments. It's nerve-wracking every time. I think I went they had an outdoor night at the zoo that was adults only. And my sister said, well, it's all masked. It's adults only. It's socially distanced. It's outside. Let's try and go. And it was the most nerve-wracking experience. And she was great. Like, she and her husband, because of course there were people who were walking around who weren't social distancing. They were in big groups. They were pulling their masks off. And she was looking around the whole time and would just redirect me so I'd be out of the way when these people came by. But it's a really hard thing to go out and have to depend on other people to have empathy enough to have your best interests at heart.
It's weird. Like, I'm trying to think how I can say this politely without getting him in trouble. A friend of mine may own a roasted bean in a warm roasted bean in a coffee cup cart business. He may own one of those things in this hypothetical, and I may help him out from time to time. And we were serving in an affluent part of town, and nobody was wearing masks. Yep. And our contact UPS guy was not wearing a mask. But here's the part that killed me. And also I helped them the next day at an elementary school, and the teachers were coming within like a foot of me. And I told him, I was like, next time we come to a school, I swear to God, I'm bringing a Post-it note and a red pen, and I'm going to go F- here. Get the hell away. Get the hell away. What are you doing? Get the hell away from me. Like, you're setting an example, all these kids, and you're hugging kids and shit. Like, stop that, man. We're still close to the end, knock on wood. Stop that. Like, but when we were at the affluent place, may have been a bank, air quotes, our main point of contact said, yeah, my son is a nurse and he keeps telling me I need to wear your mask, mom, but I don't really think it does anything. I won't go, what the fuck? What more do you need to understand? Your son, your blood, who is in the medical profession, is telling you to wear a mask, and you still won't wear a fucking, what the fuck is wrong?
The irony to me is these are the kinds of people who used to tell me all the time, facts don't care about your feelings. And yet their feelings and opinions are always paramount above all else.
The ironic part to me is those are the people pissing and moaning about wanting everything to open back up. And every time I hear one of them say that, I was like, if you had worn a mask and socially distanced last year, we would have been done with this shit already. It's your fault. It's not my fault. I stayed in my house and wore my damn mask when I went to the grocery store. It's your fault, not my fault. It's your fault. Snowflake.
And the hardest thing is, again, the poorest people are the ones who are victimized by that because they don't have the ability to stay home, to not work at restaurant jobs, at retail jobs. They don't have telecommuting. The poorest people are the ones who are going to be victimized by those attitudes. Oh, yeah. And I was lucky enough. I did work in retail at the beginning of this pandemic, but was able to essentially carve myself out a position like by tooth and nail at the job that I had, to be like, this is what I'm going to do for you. It's all online, and essentially help them carry their sales for an entire year because they had to close. And so we moved to completely online. And so we did all of that for a whole year before they reopened. But that is definitely the exception to the rule. And so many people did not have that luxury.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends that owns like the bars or breweries or restaurants and shit. Oh, yeah. Oh, God, you want to go down a nightmare rabbit hole. I can tell you about something here, but they keep fighting to stay open later because they're not making it. And I'm like, I understand, guys, but holy shit, man. Like, I'm not faulting you because you're trying to make money. Hell, I worked in this pandemic. All of my work went away. I've worked construction. I've worked with my buddy at the coffee
people are just trying to keep their businesses afloat, keep their people paid, pay their own bills, keep their own health insurance. And so the hard thing is people get angry when they're like, oh, all these restaurants want to stay open late. I'm like, they're a symptom. They are not the problem. They're a symptom.
Right. And so do you follow wrestling at all? I hate telling people about this because it does not look good for my city.
I do not.
Okay. Do you know who The Undertaker is? Have you ever heard that? Yes. You do? Okay. Yes. So do you know who Kane is? Who was his brother?
Actually, I do. For not following, I know who all these people are. Kane. I'm adjacent to enough white people. Okay.
Kane is our county mayor.
Oh, okay.
That's the appropriate. Thank you. That's the appropriate response. He's an anti-masker. He thinks everything should be wide open. We had the Knox County Health Board actually started a group, like a health advisory council, to like tell the restaurants, like, we need to shut down. Let's make sure you're spreading out, all that. The county sheriff said, if I see stuff, I will not cite anybody. So there are
reading that, yeah.
So there are bars that were supposed to close at 10 on our what's called the Strip, which is where our college, University of Tennessee's a big ass college, and we were known for a college town forever. But you see just a line of college kids, all. I'm gonna use a term that is inappropriate, nuts to butts, like just right up on one another.
Yeah, no distancing whatsoever.
No distancing, no masks, and it's 11:30 at night on a Thursday. And the county sheriff, so they is like, no, I'm not going to do anything because I don't believe in this. I'm like, good job, dude. You're an idiot. But this Knox County Health Commission, our county commissioners and Kane, I will not call him mayor, Kane, have been fighting since it started to reject that advisory committee. And they finally got it passed. And one of the county commissioners is in a photo doing this in front of his staff, celebrating that they got rid of that advisory committee in front of his staff, who a lot of them are over the age of 60. None of them are wearing masks. All of them are white. Big shocker there. And so here's me, the kid who grew up rough tumble next to my very left-leaning, affluent white friends. We're talking about that event, and I'm not I can be not a very nice person. So I said, I hope that dude gets anal cancer, and I hope it hurts a lot because people are fucking dying. And fuck that guy. He's celebrating that he is literally killing people. Fuck that guy. And my friends were like, oh, you can't say that. I was like, not only can I say that, if somebody will pay my bail, I will gladly powerbomb that asshole in public. I was like, I'm tired of this shit. You have to start fighting back. You can't be I hate to use the term pansy, but you can't be a pansy, but stop.
Well, and it's polite. That's the problem. And that is also a white problem.
Yep.
That is very much a white problem, which is, it's the reason that you can have big holiday family dinners and you have Uncle Buck who's going to come in and start throwing around racial slurs when he's had a couple beers, and everyone's like, "Oh my God!" And they're like, "Just don't make a scene. Don't make a scene." Like, and that is literally like it is pounded into white people. You don't make a scene. You have to be nice. You don't make a scene. I'm like, make a fucking scene.
So I will say I have one of those uncles, and I've been playing poker with my dad and uncle since I was 8. And I actually have 2 of those. It's weird. I'm sure you understand this. I have uncles, and then I have air quotes uncles, like, you know, and 2 of them, one of them by blood, one of them not by blood, are pretty fucking reprehensible with shit like that. It's not that I don't make a scene. I have a lot of anger, if you haven't noticed, even though I'm talking politely in my best NPR voice, but I have a lot of anger and rage in me. And there's a strong chance that if at poker I actually unleashed, I would end up punching one of them. It would not end up well. And it's been more for my sanity to just be like, you're an idiot. Like, try to calmly tell them they're an idiot without going into full-on Collins family rage mode.
And for sure, like, at least even saying, I'm not even going to entertain this, we're done, you're stupid, is better than just politely saying nothing.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of that. And that's part of the reason I think, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but it's part of the reason why people of color and BIPOC are tone policed so heavily in conversations with white people when they say, and I mean, I can get into how weaponized white women's tears are, especially by white supremacy, that they are tools of white supremacy, but they're also complicit in it. In that anytime a person of color or BIPOC will say, this is problematic, and this is what you're doing, this is a harmful practice, there's no raised voices, there's no name calling. I don't understand why you're being so mean and a bully. I'm being attacked because accountability, they're not used to accountability ever. And any kind of accountability or speaking up is absolutely horrifying because they would never do that.
So this gets into something that I have actually fussed at my friends that are super. What's funny, I say all this, I've always called myself a pretty hardcore, like, centrist, like on feeling, because I feel like there's a difference between personal and public policy. I think there's stuff that I would do as a person, as an individual rights thing, but I don't feel good publicly decreeing that. Like, good Lord, man, we're getting into the heavy shit today. This is awesome. Like, I use abortion as an example. Mm-hmm. I think abortion should be free and fucking legal. Like, how dumb, like, you just don't have one if you don't. Also, I'm a dude and I shouldn't have the right. But personally, and I did get in a scenario to where I was like, you know what? If you do not want the baby and would be willing to give it to me, I will accept responsibility for this. And I think there's a dynamic between personal and public policy in a lot of shit. Like, even like death penalty, all this stuff. But I feel like anymore, you have to be on a team. You have to be extreme to one way or extreme on the other. But laugh.
In that situation, you had a choice.
Right.
Potentially. Right. Whereas you didn't have other people dictating your choices for you.
That's what I mean.
Hard to say the other person in that scenario, like, I mean, that obviously that's personal and that would have to come between the two of you. And your partner in that scenario saying, this, I am not okay with carrying this in my body and what it would do to me, what it would do to me chemically, emotionally, physically. I can't do that. That's, you know, and that comes down to bodily autonomy and different things. But those are discussions you can have because the state and because other people didn't tell you what choices you had to make.
100%. And that's what I meant. And I told her, I was like, if you want to have an abortion, have it. It's not fucking my decision. But if you're on the fence and would do not want the baby, but are willing to have the baby, like, it was minutia, not a sticking point. That's a wrong way.
I think part of it is looking at those issues because they are trigger issues. They are obviously like people feel very strongly about a lot of these things. And I think people miss the forest for the trees in seeing the way that these are used to cause global harm and control to entire populations. If you look at the rate at which, especially in our country, there's so many steps to it, the rate at which maternal mortality occurs in the US. Now shift that a little bit and look at how often Black women die in childbirth as opposed to white women. And how do things like reproductive health play into that? How does it control women? How does it specifically control poor women? How does it control poor women of color? And that's where like a term that is unfortunately overused a lot, intersectionality, comes out.
Right.
It's become that's a very popular term, I would say, in white progressive circles. And I actually have a lot of problems with how it's used. It was coined by a Black woman in the 1980s, Kimberly Crenshaw, wrote in a paper to describe specifically how Black women experience society different from other people. And so one place I hear it a lot is in my own queer circles. I will have cisgender white gay women talk about their intersectionality, and it's so inappropriate. It's not a term I would even use on myself, because it's one thing to say, in our society as a woman, I'm at a disadvantage. True. As a gay woman, I am disadvantaged. True. And if I were to say, as a Mexican gay woman, I am disadvantaged. True. But that's not intersectionality, because that does not even come close to what a Black woman, let alone a Black gay woman, would, or a Black gay disabled woman. That's where those intersections hit and build. And so we see that term thrown around a lot, and it's done inappropriately, in my opinion, because it ignores the experience and centers on the self, when that should not be the conversation that's occurring.
I swear to God, I'm not laughing at you. You're just saying things that are making me so happy that, like, I got into an argument with a friend of mine that she grew up in a pretty rural part. She didn't grow up poor. She grew up middle class. And she and I got into a hardcore long tail email thread. And she said, every woman has it harder than every woman has it harder than every man. And I was like, incorrect, because a white woman on the most affluent side of town does not have it harder than a Black man on the east side of town. And I finally had to tell her, it's like, the problem is you didn't grow up with any Black people, and your poor people were like rural dirt poor people, which is a whole nother fucking thing. But stop telling me how Black people, like, I had to finally just end the thread. And what's funny is again, as a white dude in 2021, I was like, I don't feel super comfortable putting that on audio that I said that. But I've also hit a point where I was like, no, it's the fucking truth, man. It's the truth.
There's a huge amount of white feminism in particular that is absolutely, to me, that like it's centered on the self. And again, how I had said how white women's tears, white women as being viewed as pure, as fragile, like white women are tools of white supremacy. And they are absolutely complicit in it because it benefits them, whether it's consciously or not.
No comment. Sorry, I keep hearing, I'm hearing a car like,
okay.
All that. What I was going to say, God, why I even brought all this up is because I've called myself a centrist for years and feel like I'm pretty hardcore centrist, even though some people probably look at what I use as examples, not a centrist example. But it's funny that the people on the right have pushed me more liberal over the years to where now I'm just like, yeah, I'm a lot more left now because you assholes on the right are so fucking batshit QAnon following idiots.
Well, and it's almost like they stretched that so far that maybe you haven't moved a whole lot, but all of a sudden the ship is tilting sharply crazy. And now, okay, well, I was in the middle, but now I'm completely up on this side by this unimaginable shift in opinion. And I think we made a joke the other day that I think it was Pat Roberts of the 700 Club was saying, oh, the things that police are doing are reprehensible. I think Chauvin should go to jail. I can't believe, how could this woman say that she didn't know it was a taser, didn't this? And I remember looking over at her friend, I'm like, I did not have agreeing with Pat Roberts on my bingo card for this year. Like when he's centrist, like what is going on?
Wait, when he's making sense, what the hell is going on in the world?
Like that shows you how far it has shifted.
Oh man. Shoot, now I'm going to try and go back to where I was. Fuck, I don't even. Oh, it was, I kind of went on a tear. There's a small group of us that since the pandemic, I will say one thing I've been fortunate enough to do throughout the pandemic is on every Friday, I walk with a buddy of mine. We walk outside, we stay socially distanced, And that's really helped my sanity. And the other thing is every Wednesday, there's a small group of us. We're all guys, but we're all small business owners. There's only like 6 of us. And we meet up and hang out at one of their venues that's got a big deck. We're all spread out.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done that. And it's been a game changer for me. But our last Wednesday night session, I kind of went on a tear. So something that happened here that was not great. And we still don't know all the details. So I'm going to give you the details, how I've seen them in the news media so far. There's a predominantly black school here called Austin East. So I went to Fulton. Fulton and Austin East, I think, make up 90% of the black kids here in town. Like that's where they, or maybe some central, but it's mainly those 2 schools. Yeah. And AE had a shooting. They've had a ramp up in gang violence here recently, which a lot of people are like, you can't say that. It's not. I was like, no, literally the police, and there's been deaths. Like there's been like drive-bys and retaliatory killing. Like it's not been good like the last 6 to 8 months. But there was a shooting there where they said there was an active school shooter, air quotes, and an officer got shot. I don't think he got killed. Maybe he got killed. I can't look at it because it hurts my fucking brain too much. The kid got killed. And now it's coming out that maybe the kid was in the bathroom by himself and the cop charged in and shot him and did not get shot by the kid, but shot himself in the leg. Like it's very fucking wildly problematic. And then like 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, the Knox County police officers finally got body cams. And the city will not release the footage because the DA wants to build up their case and make sure everything's right before they release the footage. Oh, God. Okay, right in the middle of that, somebody was at my front door. But it looks like a little old lady that I'm assuming is delivering church notices. Welcome to the South. Because I noticed her go to another house. She stopped in the middle of the street. And I was like, wait, what the hell's happening here?
This is the weirdest porch pirate ever.
Sorry. Yeah. And then walked up to one of the, I was like, I guess she's lives there. And then I just saw her leave she didn't knock on the door. She just left a church bulletin thing. Anyway. So that's going on here. And when we had our last Wednesday, see, I'll always circle back around. I swear to God, I'll always circle back around. When we had our last Wednesday meetup, I said, I'm tired because all of our friends are artists and shit. I'm like, I'm tired of all this shit about posting to Instagram stories. I was like, contact the fucking police department, contact the fucking mayor, go down there, do something. I was like, sharing is one thing, but fucking work, man. You got to run for office. And you
can absolutely share those things, bring awareness. Yes, here's a GoFundMe, here's this. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's performative. Yes. Activism. And so while there's degrees and there are people who literally, I'm like, I understand like the summer, I'm like, I understand that there are people who are disabled, who are sick, who can't leave their houses and go protest in Denver right now. But I'm like, here's ways you can help. Here's bail funds. Here's these things. So there's a lot of different ways you can get involved. You can be calling people, you can do, but some people just feel like I have shared and my job is done. And the worst facet of that to me is the indiscriminate sharing of, honestly, like it's death porn of people of color. Oh, yeah. It's generally not people of color who are sharing those. And so the defense is, well, everyone has to know about this. And I'm like, okay, there are ways to say, hey, I have watched this video to educate myself. Here's where you can search it. This is what happened and you need to know, and here's who you should call. But just sharing it over and over, all you're doing, especially as white people, is you're adding to the trauma of something we have to live as a reality every single day. I mean, I remember my husband, my very white husband, we were in traffic and I got really, this was years ago, I got really panicky because a police car was just behind us. And he laughed and he still brings this up, but he's like, why are you worried? Like, I don't have anything to worry about. I'm not doing anything wrong. And I said, it is a mark of your privilege that matters.
Yeah.
That matters. That doesn't matter to us. Like, I worry all the time. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm doing anything wrong or not. I've had officers pull their guns on me just for existing. I wasn't doing anything. I was sitting in my car and they were, to have a gun pointed at you was a traumatic experience. Oh, yeah. And a lot of people, and so there's a lot of this, well, I'm watching this and I'm so traumatized, I'm so this, that happens with white people. And I'm like, you are dipping your toe in role playing and empathy, and then you get to move on, and we continue living this every day. And what's more is we watch you move on.
Mm-hmm.
We watch you move on and get over it. And we're going, why doesn't anyone still care about this?
But something to piggyback on what you said was, I think it's also that dopamine rush of, oh, I shared this, I'm a good person, moving on. So I saw something backfire that I actually laughed about, where in the middle of the summer, God, I hope you didn't post this. I don't think you there was a lot of sharing of, if you're silent, you're on the wrong side, all that shit. And every time I read that, I was like, no, you know what? I'm listening and I'm amplifying where I can, but also it's not fucking about me right now. Maybe that's the thing. And then like a month later, Black people or persons of color came out and were like, hey, maybe stop sharing videos of Black people getting murdered. And I was like, yeah, hi. And again, me looking at all my white liberal friends being like, hi, welcome to, I already knew this. I had the shortcut. I've grown up around this my entire fucking life. I already know. I'm already there. Welcome.
The silence implied, is especially things like, hey, I'm not calling out, if you're standing by while your family does and says harmful things when your friends are doing racist, awful things, that's harmful silence. If you're still backing businesses that are contributing to, that's harmful silence. But just because you didn't post a black square on your Instagram, which by the way was incredibly unhelpful anyway, and blocking out needed resources, I'm like, it's all you're doing is for optics. And if activism hasn't been part of your brand, you have some problems with your brand already.
Yeah.
And so there were people who were saying, well, I'm afraid to say anything or do anything because I might lose followers. And I'm like, you have some priority issues. And that says that to me that you have people who follow you who are problematic, but you don't care.
Yeah.
And I understand, especially with small businesses, I understand the bottom line and not, saying this is my livelihood, but there are places you draw the line.
Oh yeah.
They're absolutely places you draw the line.
It's just mind blowing. It's I may have referred to this one too many times on here about how kind of in that vein of that group of friends when Trump. So I actually predicted, God, I do sound like an arrogant dickhead. I'm sorry. I predicted Trump would win on December 30th, December 25th, somewhere between Christmas and New Year's on 2015. A buddy of mine and I were sitting around. I was like, Trump's going to win. And that was even before all the Republican debate shenanigan shit. I was like, he's going to win. I was like, because he's going to win. He's a bully. He's got money. He's going to do all this. Hillary has a lot of baggage.
Be their worst selves, and they were having such a rush, and they were not going to let that go.
So I think it was the night after he got elected, I went and hung out with that group of friends. I love them to death. I sound like I'm shitting all over them. This is all stuff I've said to their faces and made fun of them to their faces. And I'll tell you a dumb reason I made fun of them, and we'll maybe move on past no, it's fine. I don't care, but as long as you're good with but the day after Trump got elected, they were sitting up there gobsmacked, like almost crying and saying, like, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? And I just went into, because I see Grogu, I said the right name, on your shelf back there. I'm going to assume you're a little bit of a nerd. So I said, I went into full on Hulk in the Avengers mode. I was like, you're going to join my side. The key is I'm always angry. I've been going to city council meetings, NPC meetings with my dad since I was in the 7th grade. I wrote speeches for my dad when I was in middle school because his thing was, hell, you're in English class. You'll write this shit better than I'll ever write. He's a truck driver. Great, hilarious that he had a 11-year-old writing his speeches for city council. He's like, hell, verbs and nouns and all that bullshit. I don't know that shit. And so I've been involved in politics since like 7th grade. When I was 6 or 7, I was hanging out at a friend's house on the east side, and his black kid, Dwight, and a cop came up and started giving him shit and started pushing him. So I went over and kicked the cop in the shin, and nothing happened to me. And the cop left. And so whenever my friends were sitting around almost crying about that, I was just like, where the fuck have y'all been? Where the fuck have y'all been? This shit's been going on forever. And then George Floyd and all that. It's like, yeah, literally there were riots about this shit in the 60s, 70s, 80s. No, like
a lot of these people are taught in school is,
yeah.
Well, Martin Luther King marched once, and so racism's gone, and we're okay now. That is literally how a lot of people think.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, there's a whole lot of entitlement that goes into that as well. Like, there's a lot of attitude, again, conscious or not, of like, you should be grateful for the space that we give you. Jesus. Because they still see a lot of these as their space.
Right.
They are entitled to, and we are allowed to exist in it.
Fuck that. Fuck white people. That's my t-shirt. I'll tell you the dumb way in which I made fun of my idiot friends. One of them got a little drunk and started talking about lifting weights. And I played sports all my life. I've been lifting weights since I was like in fucking 6th grade. And they're sitting there and they're like, you should be able to lift like your body weight plus 10%. I was like, you're out of your fucking mind. That's not how any of this works. I was like, if you train and you max out, yes, you can get to that, but I can't do that right now. And one of the guys was like, yeah, I read on the internet once. And I was like, oh, really, guys? Really? You've read on the internet and you're drunk ass. Y'all are fucking idiots. And the next week, the drunk dude apologized to me. He's like, I don't know why I was talking out of my ass. And what's funny is he then explained it to a friend who wasn't there. And he said, just pointed at me and went, look at him. Of course he knows what the fuck he's talking about. I was like,
but if he assumed expertise in things that it's like, I think it's a New Yorker cartoon. And in this case, it's a man speaking over a woman, but it says, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt your experience with my confidence. And that is also a whole ass mood.
Oh my God. You're making t-shirts left and right. I know you're ripping off anyway. But yeah, that's, I don't know. And I don't know if that's bravery because I'm big. I also have been in enough scary situations to where I can tell the really scary people. And a lot of them are a lot smaller than me that I'm just like, I'm going to move the hell on here because this scares the shit out of me. I know this person, I weigh double what they weigh, but they scare the shit out of me. So I'm going to go now. Bye-bye. We're going to walk away from this. Okay. Completely switch. So growing up, what did your folks do for a living?
So both of them, so my mom was a stay-at-home mom for quite some time. I want to say she started going back to school when I was pretty young. Because I have memories of cleaning the house and cooking dinner at a pretty young age. My dad is always, he's done that thing where you start out, like I think he worked for IBM, like straight out of college. And both of my parents were from the generation where you could work your way up from nothing and have a lot, which is obviously, we know that's not the case anymore, but my mom literally grew up in a shack that had dirt floors. So wow. She is the epitome of like worked our way up to have things. You know, my dad, I think, started out in a really broken down trailer. And they are absolutely not those people now. And because he got in on computer science, like at its infancy, he was able to he's done everything from being a programmer to being a project manager. He worked on the Olympics at one point doing some of their programming. And so it evolves when you do tech careers, right. You know, what you do tends to evolve. He's done marketing, he's done all of that. And my mom made the decision, which will forever break my heart. My mom went to school to learn to be an accountant. And I think that's when my mom stopped painting, which is really sad. My mom,
man.
And she's a beautiful artist, and that was when she stopped painting.
Damn it. See, I was laughing because I was like, and she picked the most boring thing in the world.
Because she's like, everyone needs an accountant, and I can be
pragmatic.
Make money this way.
So is she retired? She's
retired as of December because her company was essentially getting like absorbed into another company. She was essentially retired in December.
Is she going to start painting again, please?
I hope so. She's talked about, I mean, I've seen in recent years, like her artistic side come out more and more. And for a while it was like cake decorating. She would do these amazing, like sculpted cakes that were just incredible. And then lately she's been saying, I really want a tablet so I can try digital painting. I'm like, Dad, get her a fucking tablet. Like, what do you need? I'll help you find out which one to get. So I'm hopeful she does now that she's got time again. But the last year was really hard on everyone, obviously, for a lot of different reasons. It wasn't a great year for a lot of us like starting new ventures because we were all dead inside,
Right.
like even if we had time. And her family went through a lot of hard times, and we lost my nana in the summer.
Sorry.
Which thank you. And she's obviously having a hard time with that. We had a lot of family members very seriously ill with COVID. So I'm hopeful that as things improve, maybe she can find that a little bit more. But both of my parents worked a lot. I was like the absolute like 90s latchkey kid.
Same.
Yeah. So
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I had 2 older brothers.
Okay. Oh God. Oh, there you go. What's the age range?
We're all 3 years apart, and that was an interesting cultural dynamic too. Is being the only daughter in essentially a Mexican household is a trip. So I used to joke with my husband that I'm like, I don't think I've ever mowed a lawn. And he's like, what? I can't believe you haven't mowed lawns. I'm like, neither of my brothers has ever scrubbed a toilet the entire time we were growing up. I had to clean up all of their messes. I was responsible, even though I was younger than them, for cooking dinner for the family because my mom wouldn't get home from class until late. So gender roles absolutely played into that. I'm like, yeah, I didn't have to mow lawns, but I had to do a lot of other shit.
Yeah.
That my brothers never had to touch. That was just my job because I was the girl.
Man, I would gladly clean toilet bowls over mowing lawn. I've been mowing lawns since I was like 10. And there was one point when I bought my house where I had to mow my parents, my grandparents, and my yard. And I was talking to
he grew up in a village. Like it's not even a town, it was a village.
Oh, really?
Like 250 people. And they had to mow a pasture, and they didn't have a riding lawnmower. They had a push lawnmower. So he has a lot of feelings about that. And I'm like, yeah.
So I was talking to a friend the other day, and they're like, oh my God, I love mowing. That's where I can dump. I was like, no, not me. I've been mowing for what, like 30 something years at this point? No.
You're like, do you have a postage stamp lawn? That's why you love mowing.
Yeah. I was like, well, it's always the stupid stock dad joke. Oh, you like mowing so much, why don't you come mow mine?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with your mom painting and your dad, Procreate, do you know about that? Procreate?
Yes. And I've been sending him a lot of that. My whole family is just honestly like a sad story of a bunch of artists who gave up on it.
What do your brothers do for a living?
I have my oldest brother. That's complicated. He doesn't do a whole lot. But my middle brother, who is an amazing singer, amazing musician, and now does not do anything with it, works in a hospital lab.
Okay.
My dad, who is also an amazing musician, multi-instrumentalist, doesn't do that anymore.
Is he still working, or is he retired?
He's retired. He's been retired for a few years, and like literally overnight changed into a different human being. It was a very interesting dynamic when he didn't have to deal with work anymore.
Oh, really?
But like I have my dad on vinyl records, like from his friends. Like he used to. And so that to me is sad. Like he completely doesn't do that anymore. My mom was a painter. She was a sculptor. She doesn't do that anymore. And actually my oldest brother was an incredible artist. And I don't think he's drawn a thing probably in over 20, 30 years.
Well, the reason I ask about Procreate is I kind of helped co-start a group here in town called the Knoxville Society of Illustrators. So I've been meaning to do a logo for like 2 years. So it's a Post-it note on it's a little brush and an ink pen. And I've had this sitting. So you can see, I can't draw on hand for shit. I can draw on the computer, but yeah. All of them use Procreate. And what I told, because I also do social media stuff, social media marketing and strategy. And I was like, man, the great thing about Procreate is you can record your screen and record how you're drawing.
Process.
And I love those videos. There's an artist. No, I took it down. There's an artist out of Atlanta called Designed by Shay, SHEA, that she does that, where it'll be the final piece. And then you swipe, and it's God,
I love that. Yeah.
So that's why I'm being a ambassador. Like, yes, get your mom a tablet. Get your and there's something I've got on my notes I'll mention at the end that maybe this will be could be a good family trip for y'all to come to my neck of the woods. But I'll get to that later. So it sounds like when you were young, it was a very artistic and creative household. Like did they encourage that in y'all?
And I do feel like my family always encouraged that. They were big readers. Like my dad actually used to read to us from the time when we were little. He would read to us before bed. Even when we were teenagers, like we always had dinner at a table. Like that was their thing. Like we're going to have dinner together at the table, not on TV trays. And then we'd be in high school. Like we weren't little kids by this point. And then we'd clean up dinner and we'd go sit in the family room and he'd read us Jurassic Park. Nice. Or Andromeda Strain, or like any book he was listening to or reading at the moment, he'd come and we would have story time and my dad would read to us. So that was, I feel like my family really focused a lot on like cultural enrichment in a lot of ways. And when I went to pursue artistic things in college, I wasn't dissuaded from them.
Okay.
I didn't stick with them necessarily as majors. For a variety of reasons, but I was not dissuaded from them. When I got an opera scholarship going into college, they were really happy about it. They really supported that. They were worried they're like, yeah, a lot of theater people, they are waitresses. Yeah. And so I think they were happy when I switched majors later on. And when I left that career entirely, because then I went into a science career, and when I left that entirely, there's always been a little bit of pushback that as I've gotten older and better with boundaries, that they've understood. They're like, okay, we don't know what we're talking about. We need to sit down.
So that in my family, so I have a sister who's 11 and a half years younger than me. But my dad worked as a truck driver, essentially since he was got back from the service, worked at the utilities plant here for a while, worked at the university doing maintenance and stuff, but then got into trucking when he was 23 or so. And did it until he retired. So for 45 years, I think. And then my mom worked for the phone company. And I love my mom to death. The day after she turned 18, she went and started working for the phone company. 30 years and 9 months later to the day she retired. The first day she was able to retire, she's like, I'm out. Screw this shit.
It was a means to an end. It was a way to support her family. But I think that's a lot of our parents come from that generation, that it's like, this is what you do, and suffering is a virtue. And we're all going, there's plenty of suffering. I don't need to.
And out of all of my family, I am the only artist in my family and makes a living, knock on wood, good Lord, though, through art, which they don't understand. Like when I was working at a print shop, I was sick one day and I had to go into work. And they're like, why are you going into work? I was like, because if I don't do the art and create the film, the presses don't run. So there's 20 people past me that don't work if I don't.
If you're a creator, you're like, because I need to pay my rent. There's nobody who's. And then everybody retired and you're an artist. They're like, well, take some time for yourself. Yeah. You're like, that's great advice, but you don't understand the dynamic of it.
Well, at that point I was living with my parents. So it was like, hey, I've got DVDs and CDs to buy, people. There was one of the few times I was actually I worked for that print shop for 5 years. And I think I took a grand total in 5 years, 6 days off. And one of them, because I was so sick, I passed out at 9 o'clock at night and did not wake up through my alarm. And my dad just finally opened the door and he's like, boy, I called your damn work. You're not going in. They're fine. Get better. And he went to work.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did. I stayed at home and got better because I was so ungodly sick. I can't even remember what it was, the flu or something.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have got, because I was making other people sick. I was an idiot, but I was also 20.
There's also a very toxic capitalist. Yeah. You're only worth as much as you work, that we all live with as well. That plays into that.
Yeah, that's you. I'm going to just slightly dip my toe in the white affluent side for a second and say, I was about 2 years into working for myself, and I ran into a person that I know that her and her husband, God love them, they both seem like grifters to me. Everything they start seems to be a little bit of, we're going to get as much money as we can, and then we're going to fuck off. So, God, can I say that? Fuck it. I don't care. I'll say this to their face. She bought or rented a place kind of on the black side of town and wanted to keep it open for a mixed use creative space, but she called it the white space. It's like, wow, you are tone deaf. But she and I started talking, and she not. I think that's, never mind. Not going to make that joke. That was just for you. That was just for you on video. But she and I were talking. She didn't realize I'd been working for myself for 2 years. I was like, fuck, we're friends and you don't. Okay. And she was like, isn't it the best? I was like, some days. And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, some days it's really damn hard. And she was like, oh, and walked away. I was like, what the fuck just happened here? Working for yourself is not always sunshine and rainbows.
It often isn't. It's really hard. And
Yeah.
and I work with a lot of creative people and content creators who work entirely for themselves, who are pulling, 80-hour weeks just trying to put stuff out. And their following will be like, take care of yourself, take some time. And I know it's meant well.
Yeah.
It comes from a good place, but that's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
Okay. So you went to school to become opera, but switched to science.
Yeah, I was studying. So when I was in college originally, I was studying, vocals, theater and acting. I was in the dance company, and then I minored in neurobiology because, and I think my third year, after 3 years of doing acting, I was like, I can't do this full time. There was unfortunately some health issues that were coming up that were going to make dance impossible to do anymore. And I decided I was going to move back to Denver because I was like, I can't keep going to this school and watch this all happen without me.
Right.
I can't. So I moved back here, and eventually went to school to study veterinary nursing, which I did for a few years, and that was great. I eventually went into actually neurosurgery veterinary nursing, and that burned me out so badly for so many reasons. It was such a hard practice, and the particular place I was at was so abusive and so toxic, on top of what is already a really difficult job, because our patients are very, very sick in an emergency hospital. Like, I worked with basically a bunch of specialties. There was a cardiologist, there was an oncologist. And so anytime you have a pet and you bring them to it's like having your primary care physician, and they're like, I can't deal with this, you need to go see a cardiologist. I worked in a building with all of those specialists.
Wow.
And so a lot of times, because we all share the same space, you'd put up, like, cardio would be like, hey, we need a fill-in tech for these dates, and other techs from other practices would come sign up. No one would sign up to work with ours ever.
Wow.
No one wanted to work for it, because in addition to, like, I'm like, the surgery side, actually, like, that sounds scary. The spinal surgery, those were the easy patients.
Really?
Yeah, that was the easy patients. It was the brain disease patients that made it so difficult, and it was so varied. And unfortunately, even the simple cases, because it's so expensive, like, we had a very high rate of euthanasia, unfortunately, just because patients would be too sick, or people just couldn't spend $8,000 to do surgery and extended hospital stays, which I get. And of course, that's the nurses. We're always spending time with our people. And I remember sitting with a gentleman who was crying because he loved his dog so much. He says, my kid's in the hospital with cancer. And I'm like, I know. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you're not making the wrong choice. I'm sorry. And it was every day. And so that's just the normal job, is incredible compassion fatigue. And then add on to that, it was awful and toxic. And I worked 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
And so when I left that job, it was a break.
Oh.
And
was it mainly, what was it, a wide variety of pets? Like with Colorado, I'm thinking
that
like
one was just mostly my first practice was mixed. We did do barn calls and everything.
Yeah.
But that was just standard medicine. We essentially operated on, I would say maybe we had one or two exotics once in a while, but it was dogs and cats.
Okay.
Essentially.
Domesticated dogs and cats. Okay.
So we didn't even deal with a lot of exotics. It was mostly dogs and cats, heavily skewed toward dogs, because cats are just different when it comes to everything. And they don't tend to have the same kind of spinal issues. When they have seizures, they're very different from how dogs have seizures and brain disease. So we dealt with mostly dogs at that practice. And I left it, like, had a complete breakdown at some point and left that job, meaning I was going to take a short break and then just go back to doing regular animal practice. And that was probably over 7 years ago. So I'd actually, my best friend, back from when I was 12 years old, like, my best friend worked at a little local yarn shop that was run by a woman who was a teacher at our high school back in the day. And they said, Rae's a great knitter. We should really just hire her. And I started working there, like, as it's just a few days a week, and it's something, and I can go. And it was such a wonderful healing space. And like, that store, eventually she retired and it closed. but it was a wonderful healing space. And that's what allowed me to start really being artistic again. And I think it started with them going, oh, hey, we have this, what a lot of states have is a yarn crawl, or things where a bunch of different stores will, the whole point is it's like a pub crawl, only it's yarn shops.
Okay.
And people will go to all of them. There's usually a specialty yarn or special sales. And a lot of times each shop will have a free pattern that you can do for that. So
there's I've got friends who do this, and I'll get back to that in a second, but they will just take over a part of town called the Old City and just line like the telephone poles and the street lights with
yarn bombing. Yeah.
Yarn bombing. And the funniest one to me is chain link fencing, that they'll do it on chain link fencing. And it's so wild. And it's almost like the artistic side of me is like, I want to come back every day and see how it denigrates in nature. Like, that's the part that's fascinating to me.
We had on our street at one point too, we had all of our customers bring squares and we sewed them up around the trees.
That's awesome.
The police department was not happy about and made us take down. So then all of our customers started knitting little birds that we would hide up in the trees.
That's awesome.
To find man. Yeah.
Did you do, like, how did you get into knitting, and did you do knitting as a stress relief when you were at doing the veterinary work?
So I got into fiber work because actually my Nana was an amazing crocheter. And since our language had been withheld from us, I'm not sure sorry, I had a little bit of lag on you.
Oh.
Our language had been withheld from us when we were younger. So she and I, for a lot of years, had a language barrier. And her way to speak to me was, she showed me when I was 3 or 4, she showed me how to crochet, even though we couldn't speak the same language. She showed all of her grandkids. I was the only one who stuck with it. So she got really excited, and she would put pieces in front of me and watch me visually deconstruct them and figure out how to do them. And that's how we communicated.
Okay.
And so a few years later, somebody else's grandmother showed me how to knit. And then I went back and I taught my Nana how to knit after that. So it really started with her. And then, and now I spin, I do all kinds of different fiber work. And so it was just for fun and for stress relief for a long time. I think I really quit doing it entirely when I was a nurse, especially in neuro.
Okay.
I didn't do anything creative. I didn't do anything that fed me, if that makes sense.
Too tired.
I was exhausted all the time.
So
I got back into it when I started at that store.
So when you did that, were there classes or anything available to learn how to do things? Or was it more of like, is mentoring a big thing in the fiber art world?
Oh, there's all kinds of classes. I mean, I was in good shape. I actually knew it was building my confidence for me, is that it was finding out how much I actually knew and how good I was a lot of those things. And I started teaching classes there, and there's all kinds of classes. And that's actually a big part of what I did over the last year, was I started filming tutorials for where I worked on just simple technique things. And I think the first video I filmed got like 20,000 views in like the first week. Everyone's like, I had no idea that this would fix this problem.
Now I'm going to time out and go, because the SEO and social media marketing guy in my head is, did you post these to YouTube?
Yes.
Thank God. Okay.
We posted them because they were for work. They didn't belong to me. They belonged to work at the moment. So they went on our Instagram Reels. They went on YouTube, on our website. Yeah.
So like I said, social media, but I also run a group here in town that, God love it. I think next month I'm going to actually try to have our first in-person meeting since the pandemic started. I think we're going to try and do it at a park and recommend to people, like, please be vaccinated and you better wear a mask. If you don't wear a mask, I will pick you up and carry you back to your car. Like, that's what's going to happen. But I feel like we're hitting a point to where I think enough people are getting vaccinated. A lot of people around here are getting vaccinated because nobody is getting vaccinated. Yeah. So like,
there's room.
Yeah. So in doing that, one of the things I do is like hardcore research topics. And what a big thing I tell people is start a YouTube channel, because YouTube is the second highest ranked search engine in the world. Anybody under the age of 25 does not Google anything. They search on YouTube. I was like, YouTube dramatically increases your SEO on a crazy level. So I've told people, I was like, I don't care what you're doing, just start a YouTube channel. And they're like, well, I don't know what to post. I was like, who gives a shit? You're yeah, you're getting your name. And I was like, it's not that hard. I was like, do you have a Gmail? And they're like, yeah. I was like, cool. It's literally like one click to start a YouTube channel and then fill out the data. So it's like, I think I even had this conversation with Kitty where I feel like I'm fussing, like I'm finger pointing or something. I was like, no, I'm wanting you to succeed. I'm wanting to make sure that you're getting all the meat off the bone. You're getting as much as you can without that much more effort. So I always fuss at people of like, get on YouTube, damn it. So, okay, cool. Y'all are doing that. There's opportunities for classes. You've been teaching classes. Is mentorship like talking to one? Hey, I learned how to do this cross stitch.
I mean, I would call that knitting help. Okay. Like a lot of places either have like just an open door knitting help or like a scheduled evening where people come in. And I think there was like the place I worked most recently, which was much bigger. And it's an internet, like it's not a chain, but it's internationally known. They're a big shop. And they had a designated knitting help night that now I realize I'm probably gonna have to run because our person moved out of state. Okay. I'm like, oh, that just hit me. And I think one evening, like they were all making, as a group, they treated it like a second craft night because it was the same people who came all the time and they didn't always need help. But a lot of times they'd be like, I don't understand what I'm doing here. What does this direction mean? Okay. And they just need someone to help them, a second set of eyes. And in this case, they all wanted to make, there was a pattern called the Notorious RBG sweater. That was just a black sweater that had white colorwork detailing around here, but it also had these big bloom sleeves. And none of them wanted the sleeves. And so I think there was like 6 people knitting it. And I had to go around with tape and measure each person's arm and then measure their knitting gauge and rewrite the math based on that. I'm like, okay, so you're getting this many per inch, you're going to knit for this many rows, and then you're going to reduce this many to get around your wrist to do this. And I essentially rewrote a pattern sleeve for every single person there because that's, so I would call that mentorship, is that knowing usually there's a local shop where someone can help you. That is easier for some people to get that help than others because those are, also very white. They are spaces perceived to be white dominated only because they are gate kept by white women.
Okay.
So it can be really hard for people of color and especially Black women to get help or even shop at a lot of these places.
Oh God, don't get me. So graphic design is my main field that I've been doing since I was 13, and only 3% of graphic designers are Black. And I have seen that as a problem for the last 20 years. So I try to talk to kids. I try to do as much as I can to try and change that dynamic as a white dude, as much as I can to help. And this is part of the discussion I had with my friend who was like, women have it harder than me. I was like, there's literally a kid that I don't think he lives over here with his parents anymore, but little Terrell, who I've known since he was 3, his parents had him when they were really young. I think his mom was like 17 or 18. And then he got really good at design, went to Fulton. There's vocational programs there, was good at it, good illustrator, started to go to college. One good thing about Tennessee, everyone can go to community college for free. That actually started here, that then became a national program. It actually started in Knoxville. Because one of the companies I used to work for, that owner of that company thought that was very important. So he started a nonprofit to do that called Knox Achieves, and Tennessee Achieves. And then he went to work as an advisor for the governor, who made it carte blanche all across Tennessee. And then it became a more of a bigger thing. But little Terrell, God love him, sweetest kid in the world. 19 in college, got a girl pregnant, and had to drop out. Started working at the manufacturing company where his dad worked, Denso, and had another kid, not a graphic designer. And this was the problem I had with my friend when I was explaining to her. I was like, I used him as a real world example, and then this woman that I worked with that was in PR as another real world example. I was like, her dad's a doctor, her boyfriend, now husband, is a doctor. She has what's called a safety net.
Yes.
He can go after jobs that little Terrell can't go after because he has to provide for his family. And his parents aren't rich. His mom's a teacher and his dad works
There is no, oh, ask your parents to bail you out.
No.
Ask your family to there's no help. And my family, if your family's also working class, they can't help you with childcare.
No.
They don't have the luxury of staying home to
No.
assist in child rearing. Like everyone's working.
So anyway, God, I don't even know why. Anyway, so that bummed me out because I was kind of mentoring little Terrell, and then that happened. I was like, fuck, okay, who's next? Like we got to make this better. We got to make this better. Fuck, I went down it. God, I'm just all rabbit holes today. Here is a question: is there a difference between fiber art and knitting?
Knitting exists under the umbrella that is fiber art.
Okay.
The fiber art can include anything from spinning, weaving, crocheting, needle felting, wet felting, rug punching, all kinds of things. So fiber art is the umbrella that knitting exists under.
Okay. And so people within the fiber art realm can be specialized, correct?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is there anything that's kind of going out of fashion that maybe could use a boost or help to become more to the forefront?
Honestly, we're seeing a resurgence more than anything. Like macrame is now super popular again.
Really?
Oh, It's wildly popular, which was of course like huge in the 70s. So if anything, we're seeing with rug punching, with everything, if anything, we're seeing a huge resurgence in handcrafts.
Okay.
That they're getting more popular.
Because of stuff like Etsy and craft fair, I assume that you have more opportunity.
That there's more opportunity, and social media has facilitated that as well.
Okay. I didn't think to ask this on the front. Do you work for yourself full time, or do you have?
At this point, I'm about to.
Awesome.
I put in my notice at my current job for a variety of reasons, and I'm freelancing right now. I'm not even doing a lot of fiber design. I'm actually doing, it's funny that you keep bringing up SEO, because I'm working for a friend who started up her own company that essentially connects all of those separate things that help businesses. Like some need to know SEO analytics, some need to know what a Instagram posting schedule should look like to optimize them based on those analytics. They need a brand voice, they need a brand script, they need to redesign the visuals for the website. So she essentially has a whole company that can do all of that for you, or just one or two things if you need it.
That's what I do.
That's what I do. Person, so that's what I do.
You're her what? Sorry.
I'm her words person.
Nice.
So I'll be in on meetings where maybe they're coming with a brand script already, and I'll be like, okay, so what I'm seeing here is these are your recurring themes. This is what your customer experience is. This is how you're going to build these. This is your 2 to 3 sentence SEO using those.
Right.
So they already have a feel for your brand. And so a lot of what I do is writing in brand voice.
Nice. So I'm sitting there, I'm preaching to the choir. I'm just always an ambassador. Like literally right now on my computer, I have three folders open of 3 different websites I'm in the middle of right now, or mostly on the front end of one that's I don't know what the hell to describe what she does. She's not an interior designer, but she says, I want you to wake up and be happy in your space I was like, fuck, how am I going to, okay. How are we going to communicate that? And then a photographer out of Nashville and a nonprofit here in town that it kind of teaches people old school ways of doing photography.
Oh, nice.
So I'm in the middle.
I'm fairly new to that.
Yeah.
I've been writing forever. I've been writing my whole life in different ways and doing different things. I've done ghostwriting. I've done different things with that. But this last year, like I was working very heavily with this person and doing all of that and optimizing our SEO and trying to also, when they're doing posts and we want it to show up in searches, is how do you write that organically in the brand voice so it comes up instead of just like, here's me rapid fire putting up a bunch of 12 buzzwords to show up in Google searches.
And I'm curious if you all have experienced this. I have also in the last 3 years told a lot of my clients to go back to email and kind of not invest as much on Facebook, because Facebook is choking out through everything to where you can't get anything to push through organically almost anymore.
We have auto posts to Facebook, but honestly, I feel like it's our lowest engagement point.
Yeah.
We do have a monthly newsletter we put out. We have our website and blog. We put out blogs multiple times a week on our website. And then we do a lot on Instagram, especially through pandemic. We do a lot on Instagram.
And I will say in the last 2 years, LinkedIn has come back. LinkedIn has been a huge windfall for me. But I've worked at corporations, so I've built up a good connection base. So that's a big reason why. But I also feel like LinkedIn it's not what Facebook is anymore. Right. So I see a lot of people getting a lot of work off of LinkedIn, which is also, I'm also seeing way too much.
And ours is more like pushing product and reaching worldwide to push that product and make it shoppable.
Pinterest.
We do have Pinterest as well. It auto posts to that. And she was handling all of this. And then the lady I was working under actually just left to really start her own company.
Okay.
So I am also making my exit stage left to go work for her company.
Oh, okay. So Pinterest is number 3 on SEO. Yeah. Like that still floors me.
She's so great at that. And she did so much work and understood how to optimize for all this. So basically she does all this amazing analytics work.
Yeah.
That she puts in front of me. And then I'm like, here are the words.
Yeah.
Here's how you want to appeal to this person using these analytics.
Neat. I would love to connect with her and just nerd out so I grew up so like I would get in trouble in English class because I'd be like, I don't understand Shakespeare. I hate this. And she was like, you're making an F in here. I was like, I know. I read 3 books a week at home. I read Sherlock Holmes. I read all the stuff I like. Can I please write essays? Because what I know, I know. And so I like barely graduate English, all this shit. And then I co-worked with a guy on doing a social media pitch. And we had the whiteboard going and we were going nuts. And I was like, yeah, and this is how you do this and this is how you do. And I went through everything. And at the end, I looked at him and went, blah, blah, blah. I barely graduated high school. I don't know how I just said all that shit that came on the whiteboard.
It's very weird for me now after a year of doing this that I'm like, I know I'm great at writing and I know I'm good at branding, but it's a little surreal as well. Yeah. When I like one of the companies I think she's working with, they sell private jets to people. Like these are not small companies. And so it just feels a little weird when I'm like, sure, I'll sit in and give you a brand consult. That's fine. Like
I wonder if it's the one, there's one that I think moved their headquarters from Denver to here called Cirrus Aircraft, CIRRUS. And they've blown up. It's amazing how much private aircraft has gone up.
It goes. Yeah, and they all lost a lot of money last year, but they have so much money to begin with that they're okay.
Yeah.
So that's a different experience is working with companies like that. And you would think that the imposter syndrome would hit harder because everything I've done has been artistic up to this point, which are, I mean, largely of course, I also had a science and analytic education, but our society loves to devalue art while just consuming it voraciously. We just devalue it constantly.
Hello, Redbubble.
But all the things that I'm doing are things I had to do for myself. When I was doing knit design, I had to figure out who my target demographic was, and like other people who were like, I hate writing pattern romances, which is essentially a blurb that's at the beginning of every pattern. That's what's selling it to them. Like this is why I called it this, and this shawl it falls this way, and it's called a pattern romance, and people hate writing those. And I was like, I'll write it for you. Let me look at your other stuff. Tell me about your brand. And so I would start doing that. I would figure out, what are my colors? What are my fonts? How am I doing this? What is my layout? Is it consistent? How does this work on screen? So these are all things I've been doing.
Right.
I've just been doing it for myself, but that's why it still feels a little odd to be doing it for a big company and come in like I know something. But I'm like, but I do. And I had to build my own business and I had to figure this out.
This is not crapping on plumbers, but I always make the analogy of like, if I didn't know what I was doing, I should be a plumber. Like I'm here for a reason. And I actually get on to people. Sometimes I was like, using the plumber analogy again, I say when they try to like change stuff on like logos or branding that I do, I'm like, when the plumber comes over, do you tell them how to route your pipes under the sink? No, let me do what I do. Let me do what I do.
I have my reasons.
Yeah. I have had, I've had 2 logos recently that I made fun of both of these people because it was just funny. One of the guys, he's a video guy, and I did a logo for him, and I do the interview thing. That's how exactly what you're talking about. I hear all his keywords. I hear all those words, And I'm like, okay, so I'm thinking this, and I did the brand mark for him. And he's like, I don't know how to say this, but it kind of looks like a vagina to me. I was like, son of a bitch. It's like, no, it doesn't. And so I did it that way. And it was like a circle with his name is Current Media, because his name is Curran. So I did like a circle with these. He was like, I really want waves in it. So I did the waves. And then
He's like, I was just doing what you told me.
no, and then the flip side was, here's the thing I came up with. He's very like nature driven. Like he and his wife were nominated for an Oscar for a documentary they did, and they won an Emmy for that documentary about pills. And he did John Prine's, I think, one and only music video right before he died. So, and everything for him, because he's from West Virginia, is very nature and everything. And I was like, I'm going to do this diamond shape that kind of looks like something you'd see on the Appalachian Trail. So, and he looked at it and he's like, that looks like a vagina. I was like, it's a diamond. Like, so I sent him, I was like, let me do variations on it. So I did one like that. And then I did one on its side. I was like, well, let's keep this pattern, just rotate it 45 degrees. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, can you do one that's just plain, just the waves? I was like, yeah, I can do that. And so I sent to him, I was like, okay, now tell me, which one do you want to pick? Do you want the vagina? Do you want the eye? Or do you want the boring one? And he was like, I'm probably going to go with the boring one. And I was just like, you idiot. And then I had another one where I did coffee cups, and they're like, it looks like fallopian tube. I was like, what is wrong with, what is happening? Like,
there's a whole lot of Freudian things happening here.
I was like, also,
don't have the time to unpack.
Also, I was like, it's just 3 coffee cups. I was like, just because it's in, what is happening? Like, I was like, I gotta start just doing type, man. This is driving me nuts. Like, I can't keep doing being told that my stuff.
I like being the words person, because I can take that feedback, and if I'll say, what if we replace this word with this word? And she's like, that's great. I also like that word, but here's why I wanted to use this word. This is what it evokes for me. Great. This is information I need.
Yeah.
Here's how we can integrate that.
That's awesome.
So the writing I've been doing for so long and I have done this for myself with my own design work, that has honestly been fairly successful with very, very little marketing effort from me as a result. Like, I'm very passive about it.
So you were talking about the YouTube videos, kind of like teaching or classes. So is that something you see taking on for yourself as a bigger role later?
I mean, I've taught on and off for years, and I like teaching. I actually really, really enjoy teaching. I love working with people. And my shop has actually asked me, they're like, hey, we need a knitting instructor if you'd be willing to do it for us, you're leaving.
Yeah.
And which is fine, because they just pay you out at the end of the month for all the classes that you do. And I just haven't decided. I'm like, it's more like, hey, there's the idea of that if someone offers you money, you take it, you do whatever you have to do. And I'm now more focused on, what do I have to do that is the best quality of life for me? Right. And I just had that conversation with a friend the other day who is drowning in sponsorship offers, which everyone's like, oh, sad problem. Like, but it is, like, she's so overwhelmed with everything that she's doing, and everyone has a different budget. And she had such a hard time raising her rates the last time. She's a very finite amount of slots to do sponsorship content. And she's like, look at this list. And I have my inbox is slammed, and I'm so overwhelmed, and I'm behind on this work. And I said, do you think it's time to raise your rates again? Mm-hmm. And her concern is, she says, yeah, but that's going to price some people out. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, and this is not a moral question. Mm-hmm. Is it important to you that you be able to promote very small creators? Like, if that's a core thing, like, there's ways we can work around with that. Otherwise, absolutely. I'm like, all you're doing is monetizing your own suffering at this point. You're picking on it, because it's more about, I don't feel like I have any right to turn down money. And I'm like, if you price people out, you price people out. It's because you are a finite resource. Your time is a finite resource. And if it's this on demand, raise your prices. And if people can't meet them, that doesn't make you a bad person. And hey, maybe with all this extra income, you might have the ability to hire a manager who can handle some of these things for you and take some of that load off your plate, and actually have like the time and mental space to focus on a smaller creator when you feel like it, not because you feel good about it. And so it's, some of that is finding that balance. It's not just, I have to be hustling all the time. We are absolutely a hustle culture. Anytime anyone's good at anything, if you're good at knitting, if you're good at these things, oh, you should sell it. everybody's first instinct is to tell you how you should monetize anything that you have a talent for or enjoy, which does not work for everybody. It works out great for some people, but that should not be the first thing that you go do, is monetize those things that bring you joy.
I'm just going to go ahead and delete my next two questions. One of them was, are patterns a way to make money?
They absolutely can be. They absolutely can be. And there are some pattern designers out there who are easily pulling 5 figures in a launch of a single pattern. That is not the case for everyone. And there's plenty of middle ground and extremes where that goes. And I think like one of my highest selling patterns in the first week made probably $3,000 in the first week, which is, it was literally my first pattern. So that was unheard of. Wow. And I learned a lot from that. It was, I have to redo it because I'm like, it wasn't done. I would not write it that way now.
Okay.
But it still remains one of my most popular patterns I've ever done. And it's just one of those lightning in a bottle things that you're like, I have no idea like what it was about this that everyone wanted, but here we are.
What goes into creating a pattern? Because when it comes to this, like my grandmother and her sister, my great aunt Vivian, they would do, like I've got I guess you call it an Afghan in there that she made that was my grandmother's. But then I've also got a God, I'm gonna blank on it. It's not made of yarn, it's actually stuff stitched together like a material.
Okay, like quilting?
Quilt. Good Lord. Hold on. More coffee. More coffee. I've got a quilt and an Afghan. I guess that's what called, where it's the interwoven yarn. So is there like, what does it take to create a pattern?
So I will speak specifically on knitting and or crochet because sewing is a whole different thing.
Right.
So a typical, I mean, it's so varied. It depends on the item. So let me just pick like a fake project. Let's say I was approached by an independent yarn dyer who's like, hey, I want to work with you. This is the yarn. I'm coming out with this new yarn line. I would love to have you design something for it. Usually I have a contract with expectations that's drawn up with them. That's like, okay, so I'm going to design a shawl to go with your new fingering weight yarn, like your light sock weight yarn. They usually provide you yarn support. And in a lot of places, they also have to, depending on your contract, like they also have to help promote that because you're doing most of the work as the designer. Like the yarn support is fairly minimal. Yes, they are going through, but like all of the work and cost is largely shouldered by the designer when it's small interactions like that. So I worked with a designer recently who had a whole line, like she had dyed a line that I'm calling this one, like it was a Pokemon inspired colorway that she had done.
Okay.
So I made a shawl called Ampharos, which is the sheep Pokemon. And so what I did for her is I'm like, okay, so she sent me some yarn. I worked up a swatch and a sketch. So a swatch is like a little, like, here's all the textures I plan to use in this. Here's a sketch of what it's going to be. Here's how much yarn I'm projecting it's going to take. And then they can approve that design or not. Most of the time they're just like, great, love it. Hi, kitty. They're like, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. And then I'll have a due date, like when do they need the finished design? And then I actually have to knit the thing. And so some designers don't do that. They literally just math through it and send it out. That's not how I work. Like it just doesn't, it's not part of my process. So I usually have to knit through it. What I usually end up doing for my process is I longhand as I'm doing it or take notes in my phone. And then I will have a Google Doc of a rough that I'll type to make it all together. And I send that out to a tech editor. Because even though I tech edit, I don't tech edit my own work because that doesn't make sense.
I keep hearing the analytical side of you. That's what I'm giggling at. I'm like, oh my God, an Excel doc.
Yep. And so I send it to a tech editor who's going to check it for grammar, who's going to check it for math, because math is a huge part of what we're doing. You're writing formulas. A lot of times they're scaled, they're sized. You might have especially for garments, you might have multiple sizes in a given pattern, and they have to make sure that adds up every single line. And so you send it out to a tech editor who might also be generating charts for you if you haven't done those. Like I do that a lot because I'm just like, just do the charts for me. I didn't do charts, just do the charts for me. And they'll generate it because some people go from written instructions. Some people work better from charted instructions. For accessibility, I think you need to include both. Like whether or not I'm a chart knitter or a written knitter doesn't matter because this isn't for me.
Are there versions that are almost like paint by number to where it's really simple to figure out?
I mean, color work charts very much work that way,
Okay.
where it's almost like a graph with just like color work charts that way.
Okay.
So that would be similar. But it's very intimidating for a lot of people to look at the first time, because especially if you're working with texture, it's just a bunch of symbols in a chart, which I understand that means cable, that means do this means purl it, this means you slip this stitch. But and there's always a key to go with it, but it would be hard to walk into without that knowledge to back it up.
What is the most complicated thing you know how to do that once you cracked it, you're like, woo?
Probably brioche knitting.
Okay. What is that?
There's something called brioche knitting. That's it's hard to explain. It shows itself best with colors and with different kinds of like reductions, and you can make it look like it's cabling and moving around. I highly recommend looking it up. That's usually the holy grail for a lot of people, but there's so many different techniques. There's, Estonian lace shawl work that's incredibly complex. There's Fair Isle color work where you can be working with dozens of colors in a given row. There's really intricate, if you're going to look at like Irish sweaters that can have really intricate cabling, you need to keep track of. There's different techniques. Like a lot of people are afraid to do socks because socks have a lot of different techniques and shapes to them. So it's hard to be like, it's not really a linear process. It's more like a tree.
What is cabling?
So no, that's fine. Cabling is, if you think of an Irish sweater and it looks like there's patterns that are twisting around each other, creating branches, they call that cabling.
Okay. So again, going to seeing the Grogu, did you see Knives Out?
Yes, and there's actually somebody developing that sweater pattern right now.
Is there the chunky sweater or whatever?
The white chunky sweater. There is somebody, it's in the testing phase right now. So like that's the next part of that is once I have that tech edited and it comes back and it's good, then I send that pattern out to test knitters. And sometimes that comes with yarn support from the dyer. A lot of times it's not paid, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I try and move as a way to compensate because I don't like unpaid work. So I try and compensate my knitters in whatever way possible, whether that's they get free yarn to do it. And also you get like for a year, you get all this discount on any of my patterns to use if you want it. If I made more money, I would just flat out pay them as knitters. So and once that happens, and depending on what you're making, if it's a garment, you want someone to test knit preferably in every size, and then they give you feedback. Hey, we all didn't understand this point, or you said I used this much yardage. I actually used 200 yards more than you recommended. And then that's when you can troubleshoot and you're like, okay, well, did you do a gauge swatch? Well, you're actually knitting way above the gauge. So that makes sense of why you would use more yarn. Okay. Or do I need to amend this because everybody was using more yarn than I recommended? So it's a process you go through, and then I have to format the whole thing into its final, very nice layout, pretty PDF format that it'll be in. And while all of this is going on, I've been taking photos. I've been posting it to Instagram. I've been doing teasers. I've been hyping this for a couple of months. Oh, hey, the release is coming this weekend. The release is coming this weekend. And most people up until now have sold on, there's a central site where most people are selling their things called Ravelry. So once you post it to Ravelry, that's
your SEO worked because I found you on Ravelry, and that's how I actually came up with the patterns question, because I found your patterns on there.
And that's where most people are selling their things. It's been a pretty big company for years. That's where most of the patterns live. It's changed a lot in the last year, where unfortunately they've made some choices that the community is not really happy with. And so a lot of people are pulling their stuff off of Ravelry, which is hard because they handle everything. Like it's just nice. It's a centralized platform. And unfortunately, they've doubled down on some things that the community was like, hey, this is not okay. You need to address this. And now everybody's pulling out. So it's in a little bit of a limbo right now, but generally you would have it posted to Ravelry. And that is a no contact sale at that point. Once it's there, if you're on Ravelry, you click download, it adds to their Ravelry library, it sends money to a designer, and then once a month you pay your bill of your percentage of sales to Ravelry plus your VAT tax if it was sold in the EU anywhere.
Okay. In that you were talking about the all the steps, is there like strength tests where you like try to like rip an underarm or something? Is there something to do?
Quality control, there's no way to really centralize that, because you can recommend a yarn, but everybody's going to make it with different yarn under different conditions with different techniques.
I mean more on your end, like when you do it the first time, do you do like some kind of stretch test or anything?
Oh, you do something called blocking with all knitwear, which is I'm a big fan of what I call wet blocking. Some people will just iron their things, and this is with natural fibers, by the way. Like, I'm not talking about acrylic, which is a whole nother way of dealing with that. But that might mean, like, for example, I soak a sweater, and depending on what it's made out of, like how I treat that, what kind of soap I use, what the temperature of the water is, and how I take it back out. And what that does is you just let it sit in there for a long time, and it allows the fibers to sort of bloom and relax. It takes out all of the random memory. It fixes all of your tiny little imperfections in your tension so that it's all evens out. It looks nice and flat. And you should only have to do this once. After that, you wash it, but blocking is a one-time thing. And then you lay it out. Sorry about that. You lay it out to shape and to size. And then I check it again. So I always have, when we're talking about gauge, which is very important, I always check that in a small swatch. I check it as I've been working on it in the project. I do it pre and post washing just to make sure everything is how it should be. And that might be like, hey, I'm recommending this yarn. And when I washed it, it grew like 3 times. It's,
oh my God.
Now, which can happen with superwash yarns a lot. So that's a good thing to know. You're like, this is unstable. So if it's a superwash, I'm going to add a note that they need to do a very careful wash and block swatch, because it's going to get big if they use this yarn.
It's going to get fluffy.
Yes. So you'll do that for a schematic, regardless of what you're making. You might be like, okay, you know, here's the shawl, the wingspan measures this far, it's this deep, this is what your blocking dimension should be. But past that, people are gonna do what they want and knit how they.
I'm going to risk you shutting this all down with this. So seeing Knives Out, and I call myself not a very fashion forward person. Like if I had my druthers, I would wear shorts all year long and sweatshirts and t-shirts, and just I do not take many chances when it comes to dressing, because I'm a big dude with a long torso, and it's impossible to find clothes. But seeing that Knives Out made me buy a sweater. Here's where you're going to shut down, on Amazon. So are you going to yell at me about buying the sweater? No. And I think I actually bought it because it was targeted to me on Instagram. I was like, oh, that looks cool.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with buying like machine made knitwear. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Okay.
It's more, the only times so the problems we encounter as designers are honestly Russian websites ripping off our designs and posting them for free.
Oh, okay.
And it's impossible. It's impossible to get those removed. They're everywhere. It's all the time. And people will just rip off your stuff and post it for free. So that's where, and so when that happens, or when people, this doesn't happen as often, but when other designers are blatantly ripping off your work.
Yeah.
So as far as copyright works, like you don't own a stitch pattern, like they've all been knitted before. You don't own a stitch pattern, but if somebody reproduces your charts, your instructions, like your wording, anything, that is protected by copyright. It is questionable when they are staging photos the exact same way you are. If you can make a case for your, like, literally, like their name is almost the same, they're staging the photos the same way, the charts look the same, they've been changed a little, you probably have a decent case, but most of the time we just have to be like, we had similar ideas.
I'm just imagining I'm looking at the name of your business, somebody come along and call themselves Spark True. It's like, no, we're totally different. I don't know what you're talking about.
And I've had designers honestly rip off my stuff before, which has been a problem. What are you doing, Kat? I'm so sorry. She's in my office destroying my life.
So she's being a cat, is what you're saying.
She's awful. She's my quarantine kitten.
Sorry.
I've had a white designer with a very large following pretty blatantly rip off one of my designs, where the name was almost identical. The romance was almost identical. The stitch pattern was the same. The colors were the same. But I also know, like, and it's upsetting, but I can't say anything because she has, 45,000 followers.
Good
on her Instagram that she would not hesitate to send after the mean brown lady and have me removed. And so it's one of those where like, great.
Okay, then here, I'm going to skip ahead and then I'm going to come back and we'll end on a more positive note, hopefully. So one of the notes from Kitty was racism in the fiber arts world.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a question there. I guess my question would be, how is that? What is that? Is it that people with affluence and money?
It exists everywhere. So fiber art is no exception. A few years ago, a large conversation started because like a prominent maker had said something to the effect of, I've just decided, she wrote this big romantic thing. I've just decided I need to redo my life. It was a very Eat, Pray, Love blog she wrote. I need more color in my life. So I've decided I'm going to go to India. And that's where, and so rightfully so, like, I understand that you don't feel like you have the culture or the existence to like, that you're feeling lacking, but just saying you're going to fix it by going to another culture and wrapping it around you like a costume is really problematic. And that is literally the comment that like started this. And it just like, everything got lit on fire after that, because there was this, when I had said earlier that knitting is perceived as being white, female dominated, it's perceived. It is not true. There is a lot of Black knitters, of people of color who are in the space as creators and consumers, and we are not in the minority by any stretch, but we are treated as barely being there. We are not represented. And so that started larger conversations that people would say, look, I'm looking at this company's or this designer's like whole feed, and I'm not represented in this at all. I don't see anybody that looks like me. And so then sometimes brands would put like one Black woman on there and be like, look, we did it. And if you asked for more, they'd be like, it's just redundant, which is ridiculous. Because first of all, people like, we're all so varied. And yet they would have the same like copy, paste, like white woman modeling all their stuff, but that wasn't redundant. And it's still that entitlement feeling that this is our space and we're allowing you to be in it. Okay. And that was true both online and in yarn shops, where a lot of Black women are like, people would follow me around and, watch me as I shop, or I'd pick up a yarn, which, if you're looking in a yarn shop, as opposed to like a larger big box craft store, they're pricey. They're very pricey. Like they're nice fibers. They're not acrylic. They're often hand dyed. So it's not unusual, like for like a 100-gram skein of like shawl weight yarn to be anywhere from like $25 to $35 a piece. And when you're looking at a sweater quantity worth of yarn, it adds up. And instead of just being like, let me tell you about this yarn so your customer can make their informed decision. And I've even witnessed this happen from people I used to work with at my shop, where they would do this to people. And it drove me nuts, where they'd be like, I can show you some more affordable yarn, which is really making a statement. I'm like, why didn't you just tell the white lady who was in here, who really was like, whoa, I actually can't afford this. Can you show me the sales section? But this Black woman walks in here and wants to make a sweater, and you're already telling her she can't afford this yarn. And so a lot of people were coming forward with those experiences. This is how I'm profiled in shops. This is what happens. And even creators who are yarn dyers or designers on Instagram, as you would know with SEO, things tend to perform better when there's a person in them, when it's not just an object. And they would specifically say, yes, but I can't do that. They're like, and how it came out, how many people of color were like, I'm deliberately not even showing my hands in a photo. And that's still a problem now, because somebody yesterday, and it's so funny we have this today, because a pretty prominent woman of color in the industry made a post that said, hey, this post is for BIPOC only, like white people, don't comment. This is not for you. You can read, but don't comment. She's like, how do you feel being a business owner in the fiber industry right now? Whether you're a designer, you're a yarn producer, you're anything, like, how do you feel? And like the overall answer, including mine, were just variations on, I'm tired. Like, I'm just so tired. And one woman had said, it's exhausting to me that every time I post a photo of myself, I both gain and lose followers. And that change is literally only based on her skin.
Wow.
See, whether white guilt follows, like, oh, there's a Black, I have to follow them. And that happens a lot right now.
So in that vein, I'm curious if this is the same in that world. So my city, God love my city, it's called the Maker City. Like Etsy determined that we are the maker city. But there's a lot of people in this town that struggle with the term maker because it's like, I'm not somebody who's doing this for 3 hours a week. Like I earn my living doing this. It's like, but the biggest struggle I have here, I'm going to think through my words before I speak. Yep. Pretty much everyone who works and working in that realm are all affluent white people. And if you look through that feed, you will see the same black person over and over again. It's almost like a checklist of, we've got the one, we're good. Token. Yep. That's another one of those terms. Is like, is that racist? I don't know. But
tokenization absolutely exists. Like, yes, it's racist if somebody, especially a white person, is like, you're the token. Yes, that's aggressive and racist. But we absolutely know we're being tokenized.
Oh, and on the Latinx, also, there you go. You taught me it's not. I was trying to make it one word. I was trying to make it flow better. I was trying to throw a little southernness. No, I'm just kidding. The woman who we have this great system that our last mayor, good Lord, I'm in a spiral here. Our last mayor, Madeline Rojero. Now I'm going to blank on his name. He was, Michael Pena played him in a damn movie. He was the guy who tried to organize the farming workers.
Okay.
Son of a bitch. I'm going to blank on his name. She worked with him. Somebody who's kind of a revolutionary, and she was our mayor, which made me very happy. And I've also known her since I was a little kid. I grew up with her kids. It's going to kill me. But she hired a woman, Patricia Robledo, who is the small business advisory person. So all she does is work with other, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. She kind of helped get the brewery thing to be a thing. She was like the liaison between codes and the city and the brewers to try and but she's done that for so many. Like, and I've known Patricia for a while and she's fucking awesome. But Cesar Chavez is who I'm thinking of. That's who Madeline Rojero worked with back in the day, that she marched with him. She protested with him, all that. I'm very proud of that. My city in the mountains of East Tennessee, that was our mayor. Like, that's like, fuck yeah, man. Like, that makes me so happy. But same thing. Like I said, they have the one black person they feature in the feed. They feature Patricia in the feed, and that's it.
Well, and it's a lot of businesses love to say we are very focused on diversity. Diversity is important to us. Just look at our support staff. And that's like, that's where and that the hard thing of that too is that usually that still only serves white guilt. And I've actually had that conversation with some white business owners that, like, my former job is not unknown in social justice circles, but it is also owned and operated by white women. And I have told them more than once, and I'm like, you're doing good things. And like, these things in the larger global community are important, but what is this worth if their white supremacy still lives in your building? If your marginalized employees aren't safe in your building?
Yeah.
And that's the case at a lot of places, is that people of color are still required to sacrifice themselves upon the altar of white people listening and learning.
Yeah. It's something that I think you'll appreciate the frustration a little bit. Is after George Floyd, after Breonna Taylor, it was, let's all support black businesses. And then you look at the list and it's fucking restaurants. And that's it. I'm like, there are more black people. What the fuck it's not service industry jobs. God love Miss Jackie's Dream, best restaurant in the country, bar none. I'll finger wag here. Hot chicken, Miss Jackie's the best. But it's like, I had this discussion with my buddy Adam the other day, because he and I have talked about this a lot. And I said, don't pat yourself on the back for knowing what Jackie's Dream is. Don't pat yourself on the back. That's one. Cool. What's next? What are you what are you going
to do to stop this violence? What are you doing to even the playing field?
Yep. And if you're wanting to support Black businesses, it's not just restaurants. There are all these other, and there's one group that keeps posting like, here's a list of Black businesses. I was like, or there's a Black man who owns a consulting company that has developed a website to list all the Black businesses in town. How about we talk to him? Maybe let him handle this instead of the white people? Maybe just a thought, just thinking out loud.
A lot based on that, like, and it's, again, it feeds right back into the you should be great, like that whole narrative, you should be grateful you're getting attention, is that every time something violent happens, my follower count goes up. Wow. And I know that's the case for a lot of other creators as well. And honestly, it sucks. It fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, oh, yay. But people, I'm like, no, like even after this yesterday, just responding to this question, like, how do you, as, you know, a BIPOC in the fiber industry, how do you feel? I got, I think, like 20 new follows in the first 24 hours when I haven't been keeping up on that Instagram, and it was all white people.
Because
I'm a little resentful that I'm like, you guys are literally just looking through this list of people so that you can show you're following people of color. You're not actually like supporting us in any meaningful way.
So it's maybe this is a bad analogy, but because you know this, you'll understand this analogy. I hope I'm not treading on dangerous ground here. I come from a good place. I swear to God, it's same thing of like buying bots. You want authentic followers that are going to purchase and support from you.
Absolutely.
You don't want bullshit ones that are just going, that are not just going to boost your count. Fuck your count. Fuck your followers. You want people who actually give a shit about you.
Yeah. Promote my business, buy my patterns, support me, support the dyers that I'm working with. Cause I'm like, I can control my process. Right. I can work with, if I'm like, you know what, like people of color, queer people are used in my process as much as possible, as test knitters, as anybody I can pay, they're used in that process as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wouldn't be hard. Like, yeah, even if you don't like my Ampharos shawl pattern, go look at this person's other yarns, go support them, like buy them, pay us.
Right.
We don't want your sympathy, follow, pay us.
Have you seen Goodfellas?
Yes.
I want to make this into something, the Ray Liotta quote where he keeps going, fuck you, pay me. Fuck you.
We say that all the time, actually. Yeah. We say that all the time.
I love that. So there's
a cross stitcher who has that on hers, because every time
that's awesome.
And we get sought by a lot of white people who are like, look, I'm featuring this person. Like, you're not doing anything for me. You're asking me for free labor. You're not helping me.
So I've shit on my city enough. I've got to, you saying something made me think. I think it's second, maybe third, but I think it's second biggest pride parade in the country.
Yeah.
Right here, Knoxville, Tennessee. It's fucking awesome. We've had protesters before, which is same thing, kind of like adorable. And even the cops are like, fuck them. it's a great, I love that about my city, that we are very queer friendly and all that here in town.
There's been a shift in conversation for sure over the last few years and everything that's going on. But I mean, those conversations are still all the time. And I am going to say that especially Black women in this industry, yes, like all people of color are affected negatively by this, but I really think we need to focus on how much Black women are suffering. Yeah. And it can range anything from like the benign part of that is the white guilt followers. That's the most benign part of that. And other people who will accuse them, they're like, you're only successful because you're Black, which is bullshit, because I know how much work these people put into what they're doing and making amazing product and throwing everything they have into it, but will continue to reward absolute mediocrity from white women in the industry. And people will say things like that. I mean, I have to like, I feel bad about it sometimes, but I don't even look at my message requests. I just delete them because I'm so tired of filtering out racist vitriol every time something happens, and everyone has to face that. And like one thing that happened a few years back was Ravelry, that central site that I had talked about, which is also run by white people. Let's start there. Also run by white people, made the decision to ban Trump-related things on their site, citing it as hate speech. I understand why they made that decision, and they're a private platform. They can do whatever they want. And there was a popular in circles, I won't say popular because I don't think they were a popular person that went by the name Deplorable Knitter, that was putting out patterns that would say build the wall and different things like that. And so they took them down. They're like, nope, not on this site. Sorry, we're done. And if you keep doing this, we're going to ban you from the site. And so of course they got really pissed. Everyone left. They got banned, bad Ravelry. And so start a flood of white people posting, I stand with Ravelry. While the rest of us were literally like, fuck, you know who's going to take the fallout for this? And we were right. And so while they got to feel like virtuous white people because they had booted the Trumpers off their site and everyone stood up and they were so brave, they left the rest of us in the water with the sharks. And we were the ones who were getting inundated by, like, they had Facebook groups that this woman had organized where hundreds of her followers would go after prominent creators of color and mass spam report their accounts to get them shut down, send them hate mail, dox them. We had multiple people who were doxed and had their personal information sent out, all while Ravelry got to feel virtuous.
I'm gonna start a new business. Anybody who does that doxes those people, hire me. The show The Equalizer that got turned into Denzel movie, or the Queen Latifah. I'm just gonna show up at those people's house and say, "Are you so and so?" Cool, and then just start punching. That's going to be my new job.
But this is something that happens over and over, is why people get to go, look how brave we're being. We're taking a stand, but we're the ones taking the punches.
So here's, again, inappropriate thought from a white dude in 2020. I've had this discussion with, I don't, maybe this is wrong. I don't know. It's also close friends. Like, I have two or three close friends that I can talk to about anything. And they happen to be dudes. Like, that's the only reason. But I said, I'm really struggling with this. I call it the You Go Girl movement of artists that they have these massive followings, and it doesn't matter what they post. It's always You Go Girl. And those people keep succeeding, even though they're mediocre. Yep. I can't speak. And I was like, yeah, but you're also, and I'm going to quote one of my friends when I say this. So this is not me coming out of left field and being an asshole. Because you're a cute white girl. Like, one of my friends straight up told me, if I wasn't a cute white girl, I would not be successful. She has since recanted saying that. And I will go, I wish I had that shit on video because you fucking said that. And I was like, and everything you post gets a You Go Girl. Oh my God, that dress is fantastic. I was like,
girl boss.
Oh, so she and I had that discussion one night. We sat down for 3 hours, and I said, I came up with a phrase. I was like, I feel like a woke guy in a boss babe world, because I end up losing a lot of work because I'm not a woman. And it's not, I don't know how to say that. Like, I've literally had people point to somebody who was 1 year out of college who wasn't very good and say, you need to hire her versus him. And I was like, that's also going to hurt your bit, because how about we work together or something? Like, fuck, there's got to be some balance here of just like, what the fuck is happening? I was like, also, I'm not the enemy. I'm not the enemy. What the fuck is happening? Like, and we had a 3-hour long conversation. And
anytime you call out, I mean, especially for like women of color, anytime you call out, and this happens all the time. I wish it was just like one account I have blocked and all their followers, but it happens all the time where someone will get called out for problematic things that they're posting, doing. And it's always a white woman creator. And someone will say, hey, like, this is problematic. You really shouldn't be naming your colors, these kinds of things. Like, this is like really anti-Asian. You should not be naming your colorways this. You should consider renaming them. And so there's been plenty of things where people are like, you know what? You're right. I'm going to retire this color. And they'll be public about it. They're like, I'm going to retire this colorway. I'm going to re-dye it, and it's going to be called this. When you find out, but most of them, it ends up with some white woman in a badly lit YouTube video meandering on for an hour while her husband nods next to her and makes the Muppet face at the camera, where she talks about how she was so bullied and so victimized. And you don't know me. If you knew me, and no matter what, they are always the benefit of the doubt, and we are always the bullies.
And I just look at that.
Will be filled up with other white women saying, don't you listen to them. Don't you listen to them. You're wonderful, honey. And it still comes down to the how dare we not respect the space we've been allowed to occupy. It still comes down to entitlement. It still comes down to white women's tears being weaponized, really to the detriment of women of color, and especially Black women.
So as a content creator, you're gonna see the small way through this of being like, this is a great opportunity for content to go, hey, I screwed up. How about you help me name this color? Like, it's so
like,
simple.
That's right up there with room to screw up. We screw up. And I mean, like, there was a whole bunch of people who like made a whole brand off of being connected to Harry Potter. And that's fine, but they're like, you know what? I don't feel good about this anymore. Like, a lot of them are like, I don't feel good about this. I don't feel good about this. They're like, I am, I'm not trans, I'm not this, but so many of my customers are, and I don't feel good about this. So here's how I'm going to brand shift. Like, it's okay to course correct. It's okay to course correct. But being educated and corrected is not an attack. And you need to stop telling women of color they're being aggressive, that they're being bullies, because no matter what, we have to come in, and it's, again, especially Black women, we have to come in with a PhD and a dissertation and prepared documents and a soft, soothing voice with spa music playing in the background. And it's still not as important as a white woman's feelings and opinion. Because if you ever look at them argue back, every single sentence starts with, I just think, I just feel, every single one.
Yeah. Man. Whereas on the flip side, I feel like anytime I talk about shit like this, I keep going, I don't know if I can say this. I don't know if I can say this. I try to air my holy fuck, I might get in trouble for this. But at the same time being like, fuck, man, at least some people try. Like, I think but exactly what you're saying.
It's problematic. Now you know, and you know why.
Yeah.
As long as you're willing to take that correction, like, here's why. And, which we had said earlier, if somebody's actually willing to do that emotional labor for you, oh my God, listen.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
And so, I mean, it's, whenever I hear, it's so demoralizing, because a lot of these conversations, the thing that we hear over and over from the beginning is, especially in the fiber circles, can't we just get back to knitting? Does it have to be political here? Like, can't we why does that have to be about this? And I'm like, because you get to take yourself out of that. We can't just get back to knitting and feel good. This is the world we live in. And what you're saying is our reality makes you uncomfortable and we need to shut up about it.
So anytime somebody says that, please just say, shut up and dribble. Because that's exactly what that is. Like, what's her name? Laura Ingraham saying to LeBron James, don't bring up race in this world. Just shut up and dribble.
Because it's a privilege to be like, I can just put on blinders and step out of this and not have to deal with it. I'm like, this is not an identity that we get to leave behind. This is not an experience that we get to not have in this space. So it's really, and again, it's always that, like, we're letting you occupy this here. Can you not make a scene? It always comes back to that.
All right, I think we solved things. No. Let's do two more things, and I'm gonna let you go. Sure. And I'm trying. I'm gonna tell you something afterwards off mic, or maybe I'll tell you on mic. Fuck, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this is going. Are collaborations a big thing in the fiber art world, or working with people like Kitty on like stuff she's doing with the corsets and stuff?
When you're talking about so I love different things. Like, I love thinking outside the box. So obviously it's very easy to be like a yarn dyer and a knit designer. Like, that's a collaboration that makes sense. Other things that might not make it, like, so one of the things I love to collaborate with, because I hate modeling in my own photos, is I know a lot of cosplayers like Kitty. Yes. So they're my models and they just get to keep my stuff. Like, so whatever I made, awesome. I'm like, this is a $300 shawl. It's yours if you want. So those kinds of collaborations are fairly easy. Working with somebody where it's a sort of a cross category, I would think would be interesting, not necessarily like sellable. Okay. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing for the art, if that makes sense. And there's other ways those collaborations can come across. Like, there's a thing called a mystery knit that a lot of knitters do. And so I'm always looking for ways to incorporate the things that I do. So when mystery knitters buy things, they literally don't know what they're making. They just know usually it's like, okay, it's a shawl. You're going to need this much yarn and you should have 2 colors that contrast. That's all they know. That's all they know. And then you release a clue a week until they're done. And then the whole pattern comes out once the whole mystery, but they buy into it not knowing what it is. And so this is not new. A lot of people do this. There's different themes. And I thought to myself, obviously pandemic happened and it did not get done, but it's on the list that I want to collaborate with a dyer who's going to custom dye me some packs for this, but I'm also a writer. And so instead of it coming out just as clues, I'm like, I'm going to do a teaser of a video. Like it's going to be a horror story knit along where they get a different chapter for their clue. And they have to figure out the mystery of the story by getting through this. That allows me to be a writer. That allows my friend who's a filmmaker to film this for me. And I'll release a video clue every week. And then once we're here, here's how we can like, I think it would be really fun to also, I wrote a companion D&D one shot that goes along with this because there is a lot of overlap on that. So collaborations, I think, are a really fun way to just shake things up and explore. It's not something I would do for every project, but I absolutely love doing sort of cross-category collaborations that way.
Please tell me when you do that. I've got a group of friends here that they get together, I think once a week. It's two maybe three sisters. Is a third sister still here in town? But they get together like once a week and just have, and Donovan, there's a large group of my friends that they all get together and will work on something together. And I think they would fucking love something like that, to where you get to hear a story or something.
And that's something I have on the list too, is live streaming, essentially running a D&D campaign, because there's a big overlap with D&D players, pretty much in everything, because everybody plays right now.
I'm also thinking like
where they can watch me, they aren't playing with me, they can watch me lead a DM session for the people I'm playing with, knit along and get their clue along with all the people who are playing it and doing it, because I have knitters. I have a big group of knitters who would like to play D&D. I'm like, okay, so I'll run a campaign for you while we do this.
I also think like Patreon is awesome to be like because when you first started saying that, I was like, oh man, how awesome would that be to like a Patreon? Like you don't know what you're getting, but you just get something at the beginning of every month. I was like, fuck that.
A lot of knitters do that too. There's Patreon exclusive patterns that they get every month. Mm-hmm.
And all I'm racking in my head is, have you ever worked with Kitty on anything or?
I've modeled for her.
Okay. Because all I think is like her with the corset. I was like, man, maybe there's some kind of like gloves or leggings or something that would be
I've
cool.
knitted stuff for cosplay before. When we did Critical Role, I knitted, that actually, like, I got a lot of likes from the cast and I was really happy. That's
awesome.
My husband is great at fabricating items. He can build anything. They're amazing, but I'm the art department. So he'll hand me this blank piece, and every single time he's nervous. And I'm like, just let me do it. Just trust me. Just let me do it. And I get it. And he's nervous every time, and he sees me start painting or start destroying, and he has to leave. And he comes back. He's like, oh my God, this is awesome. I'm like, just let me do it.
That's great.
And so his whole, he dressed up as Caleb for Comic-Con, and I made him, which I was so proud of, and I need to actually publish this pattern.
Who is Caleb? Sorry.
He was this hobo wizard that was in Critical Role.
Okay.
And he wears this very long, tattered scarf. And so my challenge was, I'm going to hand knit this for him, which is going to take forever. And it has to look like it's ripping, unraveling, and moth-eaten, yet be stable.
Oh my God.
I can't actually destroy it. And so I knitted in all of the flaws, and that thing is strong. It's not coming apart. Like anyone could go through and cut it, but it's going to fall apart. I just want it to look like it's falling apart.
Okay. You may punch me for this, and that's okay. Does your husband smoke cigars?
He does not.
Damn it. I was going to say, so there's two different friends of mine and I that we joke that we're trying to be the non-douchey cigar smokers, because we actually use it as like relaxation and community. Like it is actually, if you do it and you're not like, look at me, I'm a bad, like, no, like we do it because we enjoy it. I worked a job that was super stressful, that being able to come home, and because when you're doing it, you've stopped. Like that's all you're doing for like an hour and a half or so is smoking that cigar. And so it really kind of helped mentally with me. So I was going to say, yeah, your husband be like, and he starts looking at it and going, I can't look at this, go hand him a cigar and be like, okay, go outside. That's an hour and a half.
If it's something I'm just making, he's fine. But when I have to add on to his own work, it freaks him out.
Okay.
And,
that's what I'm saying. Cigars be like, go outside for an hour and a half. Leave me alone.
Like, go play a game. Go get on the PlayStation 5.
Okay.
But I mean, I've incorporated knitting into a lot of my cosplays, and same kind of thing. Like he's supposed to have these dirty hand wraps, and hand wraps are a nightmare. When you're in cosplay. They're a nightmare. You can't, like, you have to they're never clean. You have to unwrap them every time you wash your hands. And so I knit him a set of, like, they look like they're spiraling out of yarn that had been dyed to look like it was dirt flaked. So it looks like he has hand wraps, and they're just fingerless mitts that can come on and off.
That's amazing.
And so I definitely incorporate that a lot.
Oh God. Have y'all been to Dragon Con?
That's on the list. We want to go. And last year was actually when we wanted to go, and that didn't work out.
I was going to say, is there anything that you make that is breathable? Because it is so stinking hot at Dragon Con.
Wool is way more breathable than a lot of people realize, depending on the type of wool. So especially like everything I made for him was out of like very thin, like sock weight, fingering weight yarn, because it would have been faster to do it in a thick, heavy yarn, but I'm not putting him in that when it's, 99 degrees outside. And you have to
seriously.
The heaviest thing was he was supposed to have a Sherpa lined coat, and I'm like, there's no way. I'm not putting it on there. So I just got him a turned out collar and got loose, like curly locks from goats and sheep and hand wefted it onto his collar to look like dirty Sherpa. And that was the only place it was.
Amazing. That's amazing. Sorry, say that one more time.
It's fiber art, man.
Oh my God. Okay. Have you ever heard of Aramont? Not many people have. Aramont, I don't know what the hell you call it. It's like a school, but also a retreat here in East Tennessee in Gatlinburg. And they do printmaking, woodworking, but I'm pretty sure they either have fiber arts or would be up for doing that if you would ever want to get paid to come and visit and do that. Like I did a program in early 2019 called Pentaculum, where I was in the 2D printmaking, and there were people who, chipped wood. There were people who engraved, it was anything possible. And it's just this great big look into Aramont. It's all one word. But it's really cool. And I feel like I thought of that earlier when you were talking about your parents. I was like, holy shit, it can be a family thing, man. Like all of you can come. It's fucking awesome, man. Aramont is the best. Like it's just, and it's in Gatlinburg, and Pigeon Forge are the most redneckiest places in the world. They're redneck Disneyland, man. That's what it is. Dollywood and all that shit. But Aramont is this little reprieve where you have all these people in toques, or I call them toboggans, in July, very, they got the chunky sweater, they're very cool. Yeah. But Aramont, like, I think your mom, like what you're saying, like with your mom and now your husband, like
through that whole area of the country, there's actually a lot of Nordic immigration history. So that makes a lot of sense.
And Western North Carolina is kind of the same way, where it's very artsy and, has all that. Although now it's turned into this weird brewery and tech world that I don't like. I'm like, fuck that. I've got friends that right next to us in the 2D program were doing clay. And my friend Jamie, she makes these amazing like cups and stuff that it's unbelievable how talented she. I can't get over it. And but there's also moonshine there. So if you like moonshine, it's not real moonshine. I call it bullshit. It was also
had real moonshine once. And
so wow. What's funny is
out in the middle of nowhere at a dinosaur dig, and they weren't messing around.
Oh no. Oh, I've got some of that up in the cabinet. I was laughing because I was the only person from the area at that event out of 120 people, or no. I take that back. It's like 70 or 80 people. Out of that, I was the only person there from the area. And so they were all just like amazed, like people from California being like, what the fuck is happening here? I was like, oh, y'all want to go drink some moonshine? We can go drink some moonshine. Here, y'all. And I was almost having to carry people back to Arizona because they were shit-faced. I was like, you not want yours?
In Colorado, we have a little bit of an advantage because we're just used to the altitude. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fucking up your days.
Oh my God. Okay. Here's where we're going to go out on. What would be a bit of advice to give to somebody who wants to get into the fiber arts world?
I would absolutely, regardless of what you're trying to do, if you want to be a yarn dyer, if you want to be a designer, tech editor, anything, don't feel that you have to replicate somebody else's business. Don't measure your success by anybody else's business at all. Like, you can't compare yourself because you're not coming from the same place. And don't be afraid to reach out for help. If you're ever being discouraged at any time, that's not a person you need to associate with, because honestly, in the fiber world, we should support each other. Like, a rising tide raises all boats, and somebody being successful doesn't mean that you can't be. It's not pie. Like, there's room for all of us here. So try and find yourself a good mentorship circle where people will support you and give you advice, and where you can learn to do things and learn to do things better, and ask questions safely, and not worry that people are stealing your ideas, not worry that people are going to discourage you. Like, find yourself a good community for support.
Awesome. That's a good note to go out on. So hold on for a second and I'll say a proper goodbye after this, but thank you for doing this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.